The story begins with a large earthquake that shook the entire world, causing dungeons to manifest across the land. The monsters that appeared from the dungeons weren't affected by any normal weapons. The only ones that could combat the monsters were those who acquired a supernatural power known as skills. By using skills to defeat monsters, the skill holders are able to level up and strengthen themselves to unforeseeable heights. Those powerful individuals who inspire both fear and respect became known as the Awakened. At the present time, we can see a young boy who's getting ready to fight with a goblin. This young man is the main protagonist of our story named Kisaragi Tsukasa. He's a level 4 with a skill called Imitate. All of a sudden, Kisaragi swung his sword and luckily, he managed to hit this goblin. However, the cut was too shallow. As a result, his imitation skill failed to copy the target's skill, so Kisaragi was a bit disappointed at this point. Out of the blue, the goblin jumps off and approaches to attack him. But on the spur of the moment, a powerful human being suddenly barged in and directly killed the monster by burning it using his fireball. You shouldn't be struggling to execute a trash mob like that, idiot. As stated by Tadu Kakeru, who's at level 15 with a skill called Flame Master. Meanwhile, according to Kisaragi, Tadu Kakeru was regarded as the shining star of the next generation of Awakened. The reason for that lies in his skill. Skills began to manifest in a select group of humans at the same time the dungeons first appeared. They can determine one's rank and superiority as an Awakened. At this moment, Tadu Kakeru told Kisaragi to quit sitting there with that stupid look on his face and start retrieving the magic stones already. Moreover, he told him to at least try to be useful. In an instant, Kisaragi replied and said that he got it. Nevertheless, about the Flame Master, it was considered an extraordinarily powerful skill that allowed Tadu Kakeru to manipulate fire at will. Then we have Kisagari's skill called the Imitate skill. It lets him copy a monster's skill. But the success rate was extremely low and it forced him to be put at risk by getting up close to the monster. In addition to him, it was a flawed skill. On the other hand, Yoshimura Riku, a level 10 with a skill called Herculean Strength, asked Kisaragi how long he would take to clear the dungeon. In accordance with Inu Hayato, who's a level 11 with the skill of Thunderbolt, Kisaragi couldn't even fight, and his skills were complete trash. So he asked him why he didn't just give up already. Nonetheless, Tadu Kakeru told his friends to not be like that. Then he asked them if they were all comrades there. After that, Tadu Kakeru told Kisaragi to just try to make the most of his trash skill. So Kisaragi was just speechless at this moment. Meanwhile, the reason Kisaragi became an adventurer was to cure his little sister Kisaragi Mayu. She was the one and only family with the illness she's suffered with since she was born. However, the elixir was an omnipotent medicine that can cure any illness. As per Kisaragi, until he was able to get hands-on with it, he couldn't afford to give up on being an adventurer. A few moments later, Yoshimura Riku asked about what their target for that day was. So Inu Hayato also asked if they were not going to their boss's room. Straight away, Tadu Kakeru said that their target was the monster's den. In addition to him, they were going to loot all of the treasure for themselves. Without further ado, Tadu Kakeru used his powerful flames against the goblins. And because of that, Tadu Kakeru leveled up from level 15 to 16. According to him, even though they were just goblins, he could still level up if he executed enough of them. However, Kisaragi was stunned after he knew that the only way to level up was by killing monsters, since he could barely defeat one on his own. Moreover, even if Kisaragi joined a party, Tadu Kakeru and the others would execute them all, so he didn't get any experience. So according to him, if that was hot it was gonna be, then coming with them was pointless. A few minutes later, Tadu Kakeru together with his team finally found the treasure. However, instead of going straight to the heaps of gold, Tadu Kakeru went to the other side. And all of a sudden, an explosion occurred in that area. Hahaha, I can't believe there really was a bonus room here, happily stated by Tadu Kakeru. Nonetheless, the bonus room was usually filled with valuable and powerful items. But on the other hand, they were very likely to be rigged with traps. If a person happens to run into a vicious trap, he or she could be instantly killed. So at this moment, Yoshimura asked Kakeru what they should do to the traps. Right away, Kakeru said that it was not a problem since he had a good idea. Without warning, Kakeru suddenly strikes Kisaragi. As a result, Kisaragi directly fell to the ground. After that, Kakeru strangled Kisaragi and said sorry about this Kisaragi. You're going to die for us. However, Kisaragi was puzzled about what he was talking about. On the contrary, Yoshimura asked Kakeru if he was going to use Kisaragi to trigger the traps. In accordance with Hayato, using their classmate as a guinea pig like that was pretty dark. But Kakeru told them that he was just finding a way to recycle a useless piece of trash. Subsequently, these two grabbed Kisaragi, and then Kakeru sends him into a dark room. After that, Kakeru thanked Kisagari for helping them out. Then he told him that they would meet again if he managed to survive. So Kisagari was furious at this point. Surprisingly, a blinding light startled Kisagari. A few moments later, Kisagari wondered what that place was. And while Kisagari wandered the place, he suddenly saw fierce eyes. Out of the blue, a beast suddenly came out from it. Meanwhile, each dungeon has its own rank. The beginner, intermediate, advanced, heroic, and a final rank that no one has conquered before was the mythic. Unfortunately for Kisagari, he met a God-Eater Fenrir with level 80 and one of the mythic beasts. So Kisagari couldn't believe what he witnessed. He even asked if that place was seriously a mythic rank dungeon. Haha, you're telling me a trap inside a lower rank dungeon led me here. This isn't funny, as stated by Kisagari. However, Kisagari said that he refused because according to him, both his parents suddenly died one day, and Mayu was the only family he had left. So for Mayu's sake, Kisagari refuses to die in a place like that. In a flash, Kisagari suddenly attacks the beast. However, he was nothing against this mythic beast, and because of that, Kisagari was easily defeated by the monster. Moreover, he also failed to copy the target's skill, so Kisagari was pondering if that was really the end. He had also given up hope at this point, so he said sorry to her sister Mayu since he was such a pathetic brother. But on the spur of the moment, Kisagari heard a woman's voice commanding the beast to sit down. So Kisagari was shocked and he was puzzled how Fenrir could follow the woman's command. Good boy, Fenrir. You know, I'd appreciate it if you were a bit more gentle with him, as stated by this ravishing woman. Moreover, according to her, Kisagari was an important guest. After all, subsequently, this gorgeous creature welcomes Kisagari to her castle. She also told him that it was a pleasure to meet him. However, Kisagari was still in shock at this moment, but he asked her who she was. Nevertheless, as per this lady, Kisagari was in better shape than she expected, but she supposed it was still impossible as he was now. So Kisagari was confused about what the lady was talking about. Unexpectedly, this beautiful lady whispered and told him that that was a present from her to him. Furthermore, the lady told him to be grateful, so Kisagari was stupefied at this point. However, because of what the woman did to him, Kisagari's imitation skill immediately evolved into a copycat. And all of a sudden, a system appeared and said that Kisagari received an immense amount of mana particles, so his level would now advance instantaneously. From level 4, Kisagari amazingly reached directly into level 25. However, he couldn't believe it and he was still puzzled about what was happening. Well then, I'll be excusing myself now, as stated by this lady. But before she could leave, Kisagari asked her if she could explain what, but he didn't even finish asking, when this lady suddenly interrupted him and told him to use his new power to defeat the beast. In addition to this lady, once Kisagari does that, he would be able to leave that mythic rank dungeon Trickstar. After that, the lady suddenly disappeared like a cloud of smoke. However, as per Kisagari, there was no way he could win against that monster. All of a sudden, the beast started to attack him. Fortunately, Kisagari managed to block his attack this time, and because of that, Kisagari's copycat skill has been activated. In an instant, a system appeared and said that the target's skill had been started copying. But on the other hand, Kisagari was still confused about how he was supposed to fight that thing. However, he was suddenly stunned after a system notifies him that he successfully copied the target's skill. The God-Eater Fenrir skill was the heavenly authority. It could envelop the user's body with the might of the gods to enhance physical abilities to the utmost limit. So according to Kisagari, if he uses that skill, he might be able to win. But it would only last for 1 minute, so he would have to carefully choose when to use it. Out of the blue, the God-Eater Fenrir suddenly attacks Kisagari. Fortunately, Kisagari managed to dodge those powerful attacks. According to him, his body feels so light. He must be able to react to things faster because his level increased. However, Kisagari was still surprised that he was able to copy Fenrir's skill. On the other hand, the imitate skill has an extremely low chance of copying the target's skill. But this new copycat skill was pretty insane. Being guaranteed to copy their skill after touching them was great. But Kisagari was confused about what it meant by experiencing it firsthand. On the spur of the moment, Fenrir suddenly used his ability called the Divine Wolf's Force against Kisagari. And because of that, Kisagari's mobility is limited because of the effect of the skill. At this moment, Kisagari was puzzled as to why he couldn't breathe. Surprisingly, the system suddenly appeared and said that the Divine Wolf's Force skill had been copied successfully. the person could use the presence of the silver wolf to intimidate opponents. Moreover, the effect of it could severely hinder the target's movements. However, the duration was only 10 seconds, and the duration changes depending on the target's level difference. So Kisaragi gets it now that to experience means to take the skill head on. Nevertheless, as per Kisaragi, that almost had him crying. Without warning, Kisaragi was stunned when this Fenrir suddenly attacks him again. As luck would have it, Kisaragi was not hit. Meanwhile, according to him, there was no way he would survive if that hit him. Before you can say knife, Fenrir attacks him again. Mercifully, Kisaragi managed to block Fenrir's attack this time. However, he was going to run out of strength at that rate. Although there was a 100% chance to copy the skill, he would die if he tried to tank a hit from that. But maybe with the Heavenly Authority skill, Kisaragi could fight. Nonetheless, as per Kisaragi, it was do or die. In a flash, he suddenly activated the Heavenly Authority skill. As a result, a huge explosion occurred in that area. A few moments later, the system appeared on the scene and said that Kisaragi successfully copied the target's skill called Vanargand. However, he has only 60 seconds remaining on Heavenly Authority skill duration. So Kisaragi didn't waste any more time and immediately attacks the Fenrir by using his Vanargand skill. Fortunately, he was able to hit it. However, Fenrir was so strong that was not enough. At the same time, Kisaragi has only 50 seconds remaining on Heavenly Authority skill duration. Meanwhile, Kisaragi was amazed by the Heavenly Authority's skill since he was brimming with power. According to him, with that, he could win. But he only had 30 seconds until the effect ended. So he made the most of the time to finish the Fenrir. He needed to defeat him before the time ran out. "I'll beat him to a pulp with Vanargand," furiously stated by Kisaragi. In an instant, he attacks the monster again by using his Vanargand skill. But sad to say, he couldn't reach him from that distance because of the level difference. So in that case, Kisaragi decided to just hit the Fenrir directly. But surprisingly, the Fenrir suddenly opened his mouth, as if he was trying to do a counterattack. So Kisaragi was stunned at this point since his plan didn't work. All of a sudden, a powerful flame suddenly came out from the beast's mouth, and because of that, an explosion again happened in that place. Luckily, Kisaragi managed to jump off and dodge that powerful attack. However, this Fenrir was not finished yet, so he prepares to do another attack again against Kisaragi. But out of the blue, Kisaragi suddenly threw his sword towards Fenrir, and he was luckily able to hit it in the eye. Nevertheless, before the time runs out, Kisaragi approached to end Fenrir's life. But unexpectedly, someone suddenly shouted and told Kisaragi to stop. So Kisaragi stopped at this time. In an instant, the copycat skill has been activated and the skill called wordplay successfully copied. Well played. That was a wonderful performance indeed, as stated by this beautiful lady. Subsequently, she told them that the fight was hereby over. Moreover, this lady believes that she is calling for a peaceful tea party. However, Kisaragi asked her why exactly she was doing that. Straight away, this lady replied and said that to kill time. In addition to this lady, adventurers hardly even come there. Even if they do, Fenrir normally murders them right away. So she never expected to encounter someone like Kisaragi. After that, she asked Kisaragi if he would like to hear her request. So Kisaragi asked her about what it was. According to this lady, she would like to experience the outside world for herself. In addition to her, the outer world has a slim amount of mana particles, so she couldn't freely explore it. That was why she would like to have Kisarari's cooperation. Instantaneously, Kisaragi agreed with the lady, so this lady was stunned at this moment, since she wasn't expecting an immediate answer. However, according to Kisaragi, there was a lot of uncertainty, and he couldn't trust her yet. But it was thanks to her that a weakling like him was able to withstand Fenrir. Furthermore, Kisaragi had a feeling that helping the lady would be in his best interests. So, you want to see the outside world, but how exactly would? As stated by Kisaragi. But he didn't even finish his words when he suddenly collapsed. As per this lady, it seems like Kisaragi had used up too much strength, but she didn't blame him. However, Kisaragi was still awake. He even managed to ask her about her name. In an instant, this lady introduces herself as Loki. Moreover, Loki said that she looks forward to working with Kisaragi. A week later, Kisaragi wakes up, but according to him, the ceiling he sees is unfamiliar. Meanwhile, Kisaragi suddenly saw Loki, so he immediately asked her who she was. "Good grief, have you forgotten me already? Such a cold-hearted man." As stated by Loki. Right away, Kisaragi asked her if she was Loki-san. However, Loki just told him that he could drop the honorifics and just Loki was fine. Meanwhile, Kisaragi thought he finally had the chance to enjoy himself in the outside world. But Loki told him that he had been bedridden that whole time. In addition to Loki, Kisaragi had thoroughly bored her. Then she asked him if he would make it up to her. However, Kisaragi told her to get off him first and they could talk after that. Meanwhile, Kisaragi asked her about what happened after he fainted. So Loki instantly replied and said that she carried his body with her and teleported them to a beginner rank dungeon. Nevertheless, Kisaragi asked her again how she got him to the hospital. Hospital? Oh, so that's what this place is called, as stated by Loki. And according to her, she left his unconscious body in the place she teleported them to. That way a passing adventurer would be able to find him. The one who found him then brought him there. However, Kisaragi asked her why she never went outside until that moment if she could teleport. So Loki explained to him that it was because she was a god. In order to maintain her true form, she requires a vast amount of mana particles. Since that realm has an extremely low volume of mana, she could only manifest in that immature form. Subsequently, Loki asked him if she was right that she wouldn't be able to travel very freely like that. Straight away, Kisaragi said that he guessed not. In addition to him, Loki would be brought to the police for protection. Surprisingly, Loki suddenly hit Kisaragi. On the other hand, Kisaragi asked her as to why she helped him. So Loki told him that it was because she wanted his cooperation. He would be her. But Loki didn't finish her words and said that they would save the details for later. So Kisaragi was puzzled at this point. All of a sudden, Loki approaches to leave the place. So Kisaragi asked her where she was going. Right away, she told him that she was not so ill-mannered as to intrude on any time with Kisagari's family. Then she said goodbye to him. Out of the blue, Mayu suddenly appeared on the scene, and she really looks worried for Kisaragi. So she immediately went towards him and hugged him. "You big dummy. You were in a coma for a whole week," as stated by Mayu. And in addition to him, the doctors even said that Kisaragi might never wake up. So Kisaragi was surprised since he had no idea he was asleep for that long. Then he said sorry to her sister for causing her to worry. Nonetheless, Mayu was so glad that he was awake. According to her, if Kisaragi had left her too, but she didn't even finish talking. When Kisaragi told her that it was alright, he also told her that he was not going anywhere. Moreover, as per Kisaragi, they were each other's only family, after all. After that, Mayu told her brother that she needed to go. Then she told him to keep resting. So Kisaragi also told her to not push herself too hard either. In an instant, Mayu told him to not worry because according to her, she had been feeling really good lately. She's as hectic as ever, as stated by Kisaragi. On the spur of the moment, Loki suddenly appeared again and immediately asked Kisaragi if that was his sister. So Kisaragi said yes. Moreover, he told her that Mayu was the only family he had left. In addition to Kisaragi, Mayu has been sickly ever since she was born. All doctors said that there was no cure for her condition. That was why he had been delving into dungeons in order to search for the medicine that can cure all ailments. But Loki suddenly said sorry to him because according to her, the illness his sister suffers couldn't be cured even with that medicine. So Kisaragi was shocked by what she said. Then he asked her what she meant. According to Loki, the source of Mayu's condition was most likely the dungeon's curse, although the curse actually stems from a skill, to be more precise. However, Loki didn't know exactly who would have done it, but that was the work of another mythic rank being like herself. So Kisaragi asked her if he was right that if the curse was from a skill, then taking down the god who cast it would break the curse. Instantaneously, Loki said that it was correct. All of a sudden, Kisaragi told her that he was going to defeat the god who cursed his sister and cure her. After that, he asked Loki if she would help him. So straight away, Loki replied and said that she would help him along the way since she was also curious about who would have cursed his sister. So Kisaragi thanked her. Meanwhile, Loki told Kisaragi that with that decision, they must now take on dungeons every day for his training. In addition to her, Kisaragi was going to need more experience under his belt in order to challenge a mythic rank dungeon. As per Kisaragi, he would really like to do that, but he still needed to go to school. However, Loki doesn't have an idea what school is, so Kisaragi explained to her that all of the students at Tengetsu Academy, the school he attended, were awakened. It was a specialized school for those aiming to become adventurers. Well, either way, we're going to be a team from now on, Loki, as stated by Kisaragi. Then Loki also said that she looked forward to his cooperation. 3 days later, on a day off, at the JDMO or Japan Dungeon Management Organization, this lady on the front told Kisaragi that she was afraid she couldn't allow him to enter the dungeon as a solo party. She also told him to consider the level difference. In addition to this lady, it was stipulated that when adventuring solo, it was only safe to take on monsters that were at a lower level than his. He would be evenly matched against monsters of the same level, and when fighting against a higher level monster, there was a large spike in danger level. Nonetheless, according to this lady, Kisaragi was currently at level 4. The monsters that appear in the beginner rank dungeon Goblin's Den were all at least level 5. So she told him that she knew it was not a large difference, but rules are rules. As a result, Loki got annoyed with the lady. She even asked Kisaragi if she should turn her into mincemeat for him. However, Kisaragi just told her to not say things like that. Moreover, he told her to remember that they decided not to show them his real D card. Meanwhile, the last time Kisaragi entered a dungeon, he was still level 4 and his skill was Imitate. The JDMO still has that date on file. He became level 25 since then, and he had a completely different skill at that moment. It would definitely turn into a pain in the ass if they found out. Nevertheless, as per Loki, Kisaragi was quite tolerant, or she asked him if he was just lazy. However, Kisaragi just invited her to go since he didn't want to cause a scene. But Loki told him that it was still too early to turn back. Then she commanded him to try using wordplay instead, because she thought that the results would be quite interesting. Wordplay was the skill Kisaragi copied from Loki before, but it was forbidden to activate any skills there. But still, Kisaragi decided to give it a shot. Excuse me, would it be possible to enter a dungeon solo? As stated by Loki. After that, he suddenly activated the skill called Wordplay, and because of that, this lady immediately agreed with him. Then she asked him if she could see his D card so she could process his request. A few moments later, Kisaragi asked Loki if he was right that they wouldn't know he used the skill. Right away, Loki told him to fear not because according to her, Wordplay's activation couldn't be detected by others. In addition to her, it was a god skill after all. So in Kisarari's mind, he guessed he underestimated Loki. On the other hand, Loki wondered if it was just her imagination or if she just sensed a hint of disrespect. At this moment, Kisaragi and Loki arrive at the dungeon gate that connects to every dungeon and lets a person freely come and go to any dungeon he or she wants to visit. Meanwhile, according to Kisaragi, it doesn't matter what dungeon he must conquer or what monster he must slay. If it was to break Mayu's curse, he would even kill a god. At the present time, at the Goblin's Den F1, Loki asked Kisaragi about what exactly they were going to do at the moment that they were in the dungeon. So Kisaragi replied and said that he wanted to see how far he could go at that moment. Out of the blue, a goblin who's at level 5 suddenly appeared in front of them. In an instant, Kisaragi, who's at level 25 with the skill of Copycat, said that he would start off by testing his strength against those guys. In a flash, Kisaragi approached the monster. Fortunately, he immediately managed to eliminate this goblin. However, Loki asked him what he was so satisfied about. In addition to her, as Kisaragi was now, opponents like those were hardly a challenge. At least let me be happy, alright, as stated by Kisaragi. And according to him, that was the first time he had defeated a goblin by himself. Nonetheless, Loki told him that he was level 25. Of course, he would beat them. Meanwhile, the reason Kisarari's level advanced that far was because Loki granted him a large amount of mana particles. Thanks to that, he could defeat goblins that he couldn't beat on his own before, without so much as a sweat. So Kisaragi thanked Loki. Then he told her that he was in her debt. However, as per Loki, indeed, it was a simple task for her. Subsequently, she asked him what was next. Straight away, Kisaragi said that they would keep heading deeper, since their goal is to reach the boss's room. At this point, while they were heading to the Goblin's Den F5, Loki said that honestly, that place was as boring as it gets. So Kisaragi asked her if she was expecting something different. In an instant, Loki said that obviously, she was expecting a thrilling battle to get the blood rushing. But as it turns out, none of the monsters there could even be called Kisarari's opponents. In addition to Loki, that was a serious issue. All of a sudden, Loki told Kisaragi to look, and according to her, the main force has deigned to show itself. However, as per Kisaragi, there were definitely a lot of enemies, so he asked her if that meant the boss's room was nearby. In the twinkling of an eye, Kisaragi suddenly attacks these monsters because according to him, the first move takes the win. On the other hand, even against that many goblins, he could easily take them on as he was now. Moreover, Kisaragi was worried about whether he could actually fight them. But according to him, that was a walk in the park. Surprisingly, a large amount of goblins suddenly approached to attack Kisaragi. But Kisaragi didn't budge. Instead, he used his powerful sword to defend himself. So Loki was startled at this moment. Unexpectedly, Loki suddenly tried to stop Kisaragi, but he didn't listen to her since it was too late. As a result, a huge explosion happened in that area. Even the ground had a crack because of the strength of Kisarari's power. Nice, just like I as stated by Kisaragi. But he didn't even finish talking when he suddenly felt something on his body that caused him to fall to the ground. After that, Loki called him a fool. Then she told him that that was why she told him to stop. Furthermore, as per Loki, that was the price of using divine techniques with his weak human body. but Kisaragi was puzzled since that didn't happen when he used it before. So Loki told him that she said with a human body. Subsequently, she told him to remember that Kisaragi was using heavenly authority at the time. Then Kisaragi asked her if he couldn't use Fenrir's skill unless he had heavenly authority active. Right away, Loki said that was correct. In addition to her, it was for that reason that she now said those words to him. She hereby forbids the use of heavenly authority as well as all other skills copied from Fenrir. So Kisaragi was shocked by what Loki said. However, as per Loki, that was a handicap so that Kisaragi didn't start to overly rely on his trump card. In addition to her, it was called a trump card precisely because Kisaragi was supposed to save the best for last. So Kisaragi said that that was why he couldn't stand trickster gods. A few hours later, Kisaragi and Loki arrived at the fancy entrance of the goblins. Nevertheless, the Goblin King is the final boss of the Goblin's Den. Its skill called Summon Underling allows it to infinitely summon more goblin adds. Being able to defeat that boss is said to be the test of whether an awakened has what it takes. Alright, let's do this, as stated by Kisaragi. At this moment, according to Loki, the boss looks quite confident about being a mere goblin. However, Kisaragi wonders why. He was supposed to feel scared, but he didn't feel anything at all. Out of the blue, the boss suddenly used his ability to summon more goblins. Nonetheless, according to Kisaragi, compared to Fenrir, that was no big deal. He should be fine on his own. But unexpectedly, Loki surprisingly used her skill toward this goblin and said stake the flames of anger and outrage. And because of that, the Goblin King and the goblins had entered a berserk state. Instantaneously, Kisaragi asked her what she did. However, Loki just told him that that should be a test for him. Moreover, she told him to do his best. So Kisaragi was stunned by what Loki said. Then he suddenly smiled, and then he told her that she was a very Spartan god. Without further ado, the goblins approached to attack Kisaragi. In an instant, Kisaragi also prepares to attack them. On the contrary, according to Loki, if Kisaragi couldn't defeat those lowly monsters without the use of heavenly authority skill, his prospects were not even worth considering. By this time, Kisaragi was already surrounded by his enemies. However, he easily managed to defeat these goblins one by one. But because of the Goblin King's ability, the goblins continued to multiply. According to Kisaragi, he couldn't one-shot them anymore due to Loki's berserk buff. Plus the goblins kept coming in droves. Because of this Goblin King's Summon Underling unique skill, there was no end to them. Moreover, since the Goblin King has the berserk status, all of the goblins he summons have the same buff. Unless Kisaragi defeats the Goblin King, he will be stuck fighting a losing battle. So in that case, Kisaragi decided to seal the Goblin King's skills so he couldn't give him any trouble. In an instant, Kisarari's wordplay skill suddenly activated, so he immediately ordered the Goblin King to not use any skills. But surprisingly, this monster was able to escape from Kisarari's power, and because of that, the Goblin King immediately rushes to attack Kisaragi. Luckily, Kisaragi managed to block that attack. However, because of the Goblin King's force, Kisaragi was still splattered. At this moment, he wondered about what happened, so Loki told him that he had the right idea. In addition to her, it would have worked if she hadn't granted the Goblin King the berserk status. Moreover, Loki said that it was too bad, so Kisaragi figured out that the Goblin King's skills weren't sealed. On the contrary, the Goblin King continued to summon his disciples. On the other hand, Loki told Kisaragi that the enemy he intended to challenge was a god, so he must find a way to turn the tables in that kind of predicament. Right away, Kisaragi understood that the one who placed the curse on Mayu was the boss of a mythic rank dungeon, just like Loki. So if he was struggling to beat an enemy like that, he would never be able to save his sister. Meanwhile, Loki asked Kisaragi if he could still fight. Straight away, Kisaragi replied and said that of course he could. An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. All of a sudden, Kisaragi approached to attack the Goblin King. However, this monster was just staring at him. Out of the blue, the Goblin King suddenly growls and prepares to use his summoning underlying skill. Looks like you used it. Summon Underling, as stated by Kisaragi. After that, he told the Goblin King that he would be taking his skill for himself. In a flash, Kisarari's copycat skill has been activated and successfully copied the target's skill. Instantaneously, he activated the summon underlying skill, so these monsters were all stunned at this moment. On the other hand, Kisaragi wondered what it would be, but he didn't even finish his words when he was suddenly stupefied after a cute little Fenrir came out. In the meantime, Kisaragi couldn't believe what happened. On the other hand, Loki couldn't stop laughing. However, Kisaragi asked her if he was right, but that was the same Fenrir that he fought in that mythic rank dungeon. In addition to Kisaragi, he was small, but he could still see the resemblance. On the spur of the moment, a group of goblins suddenly approached to attack them. Right away, the little Fenrir also rushed towards them, and in a flash, the little Fenrir uses its skill to destroy these monsters. As a result, a huge explosion transpires in that area, so Kisaragi was amazed by what the little Fenrir did. After that, Kisaragi asked the little Fenrir if he would fight by his side. Instantaneously, Fenrir responded to him by barking, so he told the little Fenrir that he would leave the little goblins to him. At this time, Kisaragi was more confident, especially he already has a partner in the fight against the monsters. At that moment, it was one-on-one. All of a sudden, the Goblin King swung his weapon. Luckily, Kisaragi managed to block it. Thenceforward, Kisaragi also swung his powerful sword, and he directly targeted the foot of the Goblin King. As luck would have it, Kisaragi managed to slash the Goblin King's foot, which causes him to directly fall to the ground. While this Goblin King was still on the ground, he was suddenly horrified after seeing his disciples who had been slaughtered by this little Fenrir. And because of what happened, Kisaragi immediately grabbed the opportunity to end the life of this Goblin King. Unfortunately, that attack did not kill the Goblin King, so Kisaragi commanded the little Fenrir to finish the Goblin King off. Straight away, this little Fenrir followed Kisarari's order. Moreover, Kisaragi also jumps off and directly stabs the head of the Goblin King to make sure of his death. Thank goodness, they finally managed to eliminate the Goblin King. Meanwhile, as per Loki, it was clever to use summon underling against him. But just because Kisaragi defeated a beginner-rank dungeon boss, it doesn't mean that he could get cocky. However, Kisaragi told her that he realized that, in addition to him, it was only beginner rank, but he still managed to clear it solo, so he would keep getting stronger until he could slaughter the god who cursed his sister. On the other hand, Loki asked Kisaragi what he would name that little one. A name, let me think. Lufin. I'll name him Lufin, as stated by Kisaragi. However, according to him, it was just a play-off of the name Fenrir, though. After that, Kisaragi said that he guessed it was time to call it a day. Then he invites them to go and trade in the magic stones and buy something tasty for his sister Mayu. A few moments later, this lady in the front couldn't believe that Kisaragi cleared a dungeon solo, so he told her that there were the magic stones as proof of completion. Then he also told her that he would like to exchange them for cash. Right away, this lady agreed with him, so she told him to give her a moment while she exchanged them. But this lady was still pondering how exactly Kisaragi entered the dungeon solo as a level 4. Meanwhile, Kisaragi had finished his transaction, so it was time to head back. But he was suddenly disturbed after he saw a group of people. On the contrary, Kakeru asked the lady in front of him named Hoshigane if he wouldn't team up with him. However, according to Kisaragi, that girl was the one that was said to be the #1 awakened. Nevertheless, Hoshigane said sorry to Kakeru since she had no interest in him. So these men were all shocked by what Hoshigane said. As per Kisaragi, it was so harsh. Out of the blue, Hoshigane suddenly called Kisaragi, so Kakeru was stunned at this point. But Kisaragi just turned around as if he didn't know he was called. However, Hoshigane directly went towards him. At this moment, Kisaragi told Hoshigane that he didn't expect to run into her there, but Hoshigane said that she did. Moreover, she told him that she had come there to look for him, after all. So Kisaragi was surprised by what she said. Then Hoshigane revealed that she got a call from a receptionist she knew. She told her there was an awakened who entered a dungeon alone while only being level 4. Furthermore, Hoshigane was sure he already knew who she was talking about. Meanwhile, Hoshigane Rin was in the same class as Kisaragi and Kakeru, and was the #1 student at Tenjutsu Academy, the school for awakened. Combine that with their good looks, and the media was all over her. But to Kisaragi, she was just a girl who was way out of his league. Back to the scene. At the back of Kisagari's head, the receptionist probably told Hoshigane after the effects of wordplay wore off. In addition to him, he guessed it was a mistake to force his way into the dungeon like that. However, Kisaragi was silent, so Hoshigane told him that if it was hard to explain, he could show her his D card instead, unless there was something on there that he couldn't show her. So Kisaragi was startled at this moment. What's that look for? You're not actually hiding something, are you? As stated by Hoshigane. On the other hand, Loki told Kisaragi that he let Hoshigane seduce him so easily, so he told her that he was not being seduced. However, he forgot that only he could hear Loki, so Hoshigane was puzzled by what he said. After that, Kisaragi said that it was nothing. Then he asked her if he was right that he just had to show her his D card. Out of the blue, Kakeru suddenly interrupted them and said, "Yo, long time no see, Kisaragi." So Kisaragi was stunned at this point. Meanwhile, according to Kakeru, he heard Kisaragi made it out safely, so he said that it was great to see him again. In accordance with Hayato, they were glad to see him safe and sound. Moreover, Yoshimura said that he would expect no less from one of their party members, so Kisaragi was speechless at this moment while gritting his teeth. On the contrary, Kakeru told Hoshigani that he would ask her one more time. Then he asked her if she wouldn't join them. In addition to him, they would be the strongest party in all of Jap. But he didn't even finish talking when Hoshigani suddenly ignored him and turned her back on him and asked Kisaragi directly if he could show her his D card at that moment. So Kakeru looks embarrassed at this time. In an instant, Kisaragi showed his D card to her, while Hoshigani was staring at it. According to her, she had a hunch, but it was really him and he cleared it solo at that. As per Hoshigani, it was pretty impressive. On the other hand, these men were shocked after they heard that Kisaragi cleared a dungeon. Nevertheless, according to Hoshigani, Kisaragi leveled up by a lot. She guessed that it was natural if he defeated the boss. However, Kisaragi was thankful since he updated the info on his fake D card. But Loki told him that she thinks he should be thanking her. In the meantime, as per Hoshigani, clearing a dungeon at a low level, she didn't know Kisaragi had so much hidden talent. But at the back of Kisagari's head, it was all thanks to Loki. Out of the blue, Kakeru suddenly said that Kisaragi was lying. In addition to him, there was no way in hell that guy cleared a dungeon solo. Moreover, Kakeru said that it was impossible for a failure with a garbage skill like Kisaragi, so he bet he cheated somehow. Furthermore, Kakeru told him that he would shut up about it if Kisaragi just came clean. Nonetheless, Hoshigani asked Kakeru if he was being serious. She also told him that he knew there was no way to forge a fake D card. Meanwhile, Hoshigani asked Kisaragi if she was right that he was free since he was taking on dungeons solo. Then she told him that if he would like, she asked him how about forming a party with her. In addition to her, they could go into a dungeon together sometime. So Kisaragi was startled by what the beautiful lady said. Moreover, Kakeru couldn't believe what he witnessed. He even asked Hoshigani if she was insane. He also asked her why she was picking Kisaragi over him. Then he told her to not let him fool him because according to him, Kisaragi doesn't have what it takes to clear a dungeon solo. Look, I won't hold anything against you for it. Team up with me, Hoshigani. We could easily clear intermediate rank dungeons if you just, as stated by Kakeru, but he didn't even finish talking again, when Hoshigani interrupted him and asked him if he was still not done talking yet. Then she said that Kisaragi cleared the dungeon on his own and it was an indisputable truth. In addition to her, she couldn't say the same for Kakeru, who is always fooling around with his friends. Besides, she told him that she had never liked people like Kakeru, so Kakeru felt really embarrassed at this point. Nevertheless, one last thing, Hoshigani said that it was not like she was unaware of all the things Kakeru had done. As a result, Kakeru got enraged with Kisaragi. You bitch. You weren't ratting me out to anyone, were you? Furiously stated by Kakeru. So Kisaragi was puzzled at this moment about what he should do. He could make up an excuse or shake it off, but that was painful. Without warning, Kakeru suddenly approached to punch Kisaragi. However, they were on a different level now, so Kisaragi easily managed to dodge Kakeru's fist. But unexpectedly, Kakeru suddenly used his power against Kisaragi, so Kisaragi told him to calm down. But Kakeru was really furious and immediately attacked him by using his power. However, surprisingly, Hoshigani easily managed to stop Kakeru's attack. So these men were both stunned at this moment. Subsequently, Hoshigani asked Kakeru if he had any idea what he was doing. In addition to her, it was forbidden to use skills outside of a dungeon. Nevertheless, Kakeru said that it was Kisarari's fault and not his. Moreover, he told them that Kisaragi was the one who was lying out of his ass. So Hoshigani was amazed that Kakeru was still able to say that with his head held high. Out of the blue, Hoshigani suddenly grabbed Kisarari's hand and invited him to go. But Kisaragi was confused, so he asked her where they would go. On the other hand, Kakeru said that he swore that he would rip off Kisarari's mask. Moreover, he said that Hoshigani was his. A few hours later, Kisaragi and Hoshigani arrived at the beginner rank dungeon Kobold Settlement. The Kobold Settlement is a beginner rank dungeon with a recommended level of 15. Kisaragi followed Hoshigani there as she asked, but he was confused about what she was hoping to accomplish exactly. At the present time, Kisaragi asked her if she was really okay with fighting them alone. Right away, Hoshigani replied and said that there was no problem whatsoever. Then she told him to just watch her example first. In the twinkling of an eye, the kobold suddenly approached to attack Hoshigani. But in a flash, she managed to slaughter those monsters. So Kisaragi was amazed by what he witnessed. On the other hand, Loki suddenly noticed the sword of Hoshigani. So Kisaragi asked her if she knew something about it. Straight away, Loki said yes. After that, a new kobold surprisingly approached to attack Kisaragi. So Hoshigani told him that now it was his turn. Moreover, she told him to show her what she was capable of. In an instant, Kisaragi used his powerful sword to cut the monster down. But unexpectedly, this kobold was stronger than he thought. He even managed to block Kisagari's attack and do a counterattack, which caused Kisaragi to step back. Nevertheless, Hashigani told him to stay on guard because according to her, kobolds are smart, unlike goblins. In addition to her, there were two ways to take down a shield-bearing enemy. He could either break through the shield by force, or use a feint to slip right past it. As a result of Hashigani's teaching, Kisaragi managed to dispatch this kobold. Meanwhile, in Hashigani's mind, Kisaragi was better than she thought. Maybe she really would invite him. Great work, Kisaragi-kun, as stated by this lady. So Kisaragi instantly thanked her. Subsequently, Hashigani told him that since he did so well, she would let him handle the big one. But Kisaragi was puzzled about what she was talking about, so she explained to him that it was the trial that stands before the boss room. It's called the mini-boss. A few moments later, Kisaragi and Hashigani had already faced the level 15 kobold general. Instantaneously, Hashigani told him that they would start by taking out the followers, so Kisaragi immediately agreed with her, and both of them managed to slaughter the kobold general's disciples. However, they were both stunned after the sudden attack of the kobold general. Surprisingly, a new set of kobold general disciples appeared on the scene. So according to Kisaragi, it looks like there was no point in murdering the followers. At this moment, Hashigani said that Kisaragi was quick on the uptake. Then she asked him what he would choose to do in that situation. Straight away, Kisaragi said that they would take out the small fry in one fell swoop, then focus on the main threat. So Hashigani smiled and said that it was correct. After that, she invited him to put that plan into action. Nonetheless, while both of them were fighting against the kobolds, Kisaragi said that he knew that wasn't the best time to ask. But he still asked her if her guild was fine with her dungeon raiding with him. Right away, Hashigani replied and said that it was fine. In addition to her, she plans to quit that guild anyway, so Kisaragi was startled by what he heard. However, Hashigani told him to save the chat for later and finish that. Out of the blue, Kisaragi suddenly appeared in front of the kobold general and managed to directly slash its stomach. After that, Kisaragi called Hashigani, so she said that she would follow up. But unexpectedly, a group of kobolds suddenly appeared before Hashigani could launch her attack. And because of that, both of them decided to step back. As a result, Hashigani got furious and said, "Right when we were so close," as if dealing with Kakeru wasn't enough of an annoyance already. Moreover, Hashigani wondered what Kakeru's deal was. She also wondered if he wanted to start a guild with her, as if, jackass. In addition to her, if she was gonna have to constantly team up with Kakeru, she would just do it solo instead. On the contrary, Kisaragi asked her if she was really going to leave her guild. Furthermore, he couldn't believe that she would leave Bloodshine, who's the biggest guild out there, just like that. But Hashigani said that she was serious, so Kisaragi was shocked by what she said. In accordance with this lady, it has its benefits, but it was a lot more trouble than it's worth. Just thinking about it was enough to piss her off. Subsequently, Hashigani said that she would use those guys to alleviate her stress. In addition to her skill was a wide-range attack. It becomes a bit weaker against a single target. But on the spur of the moment, Hashigani suddenly used her skill and said, "Hear me stars," and rained down. As a result, fire rained down on that place. Tir na Nog is a mythical realm of Irish folklore, known as the Land of the Young or the Land of Youth. It represents an otherworldly paradise where inhabitants never age and is famous for the legend of Oisin and Niam. Nevertheless, according to Kisaragi, even if it was less powerful sometimes, that was still incredible. I feel refreshed now. All that's left now is the final boss, as stated by Hashigani. However, she told him to just take a short break before that. At this moment, Hashigani asked Kisaragi if he had heard of the great hero before. So Kisaragi asked her if he wasn't the first adventurer in Japan to clear a heroic rank dungeon. Moreover, Kisaragi said that he thinks the person's name was, but he didn't finish his word when Hashigani interrupted her and said the name Michinaga Dejiro. But according to Hashigani, that was his old name. In addition to her, after Michinaga Dejiro got married, he became a Hashigani. In short, he was her grandfather. Furthermore, that sword was something her grandfather gave her. And that was not all. Her grandpa always told her all sorts of stories about the perilous journeys he had been on with his comrades to explore the unknown world, unfettered by anyone or anything. In accordance with Hashigani, she wanted to experience that sort of fairy tale adventure as well. That was why she was planning to start her own guild in the near future. Out of the blue, Hashigani suddenly told Kisaragi to lend her his strength when that time came. So as per Kisaragi, if she was fine with having him, then he would gladly. But he didn't even finish talking. when Hashigani said that it was enough chit-chat because according to her, they had rested long enough, so she invited him to make their way to the boss's room already. A few hours later, they finally reached the kobold boss's room. However, Kisaragi told her to wait because according to him, there was someone there. Yo, you sure took your sweet time, as stated by Kakeru. In addition to him, he had been waiting for Hashigani, and for Kisaragi, who's an incompetent piece of shit. However, Hashigani asked Kakeru what he was doing there, but Kakeru also asked her if it wasn't obvious that they were there to help out his irreplaceable friends. Nevertheless, in Kisarari's mind, that was worthless coming from Kakeru. In addition to Kakeru, he came to make sure his friends didn't do anything rash. Moreover, he said that his father even provided them with new gear at his request. So Hashigani asked him if he was going to challenge the boss or not. She also said that first come, first serve, so the right was his, although she hates letting him have it. Meanwhile, according to Kisaragi, the right to challenge the boss goes to whoever makes it there first. It was an unspoken rule among adventurers. You bet I am, as stated by Kakeru, and he told her that he would prove to her that he was serious about aiming for the top. In addition to him, Hashigani would be going to see his true glory in action. On the other hand, Kakeru told his friends that the brain-dead bullshitter was just staring at them like an idiot. However, Hashigani said that it could be helped. Then she told Kisaragi that they would just watch and see what they had got. So Kisaragi instantly agreed because according to him, that could challenge the boss another time. On the contrary, Loki was just watching them. However, she got furious at Kakeru since he had quite the nerve to mock them. At this moment, we can see the boss of the Kobold settlement, Kobold King, who's a level 20. In addition to possessing the same skill as the Goblin King, Summon Underling, it also possesses a powerful skill called Thundering Blade. Without further ado, the fight between Kakeru's group and these monsters had started. However, according to Kisaragi, he hates to admit it, but Kakeru's group is without a doubt strong. They could definitely defeat the Kobold King. You like what you see, Hashigani? This is my power, as stated by Kakeru. But surprisingly, Loki suddenly used her ability and ordered the Kobold King to be filled with madness and become a tyrant who should bring destruction upon the world. So Kisaragi was stunned at this point. All of a sudden, the Kobold King instantly reached level 20 with the status of Berserk. So Kakeru was puzzled about what that was. In a flash, the Kobold King suddenly approaches to attack Kakeru. Unfortunately for him, he didn't manage to dodge or block the Kobold King's attack, so he was hit by it, which caused him to be thrown away. On the other side, Hashigani was also confused about what just happened. Nonetheless, Kisaragi asked Loki what was the meaning of that, so Loki told him that it should be obvious. In addition to her, that was their punishment for getting in Kisarari's way. Back to the fight. Kakeru was helpless at this point, and when the Kobold King was about to end his life, Hashigani suddenly barged in and managed to block the Kobold King's sword. However, according to her, it was such a ridiculous strength. On the other side, Loki asked Kisaragi if he was sure he could afford to stand still. Moreover, she told him that Hashigani was going to be in danger too at that rate. So Kisaragi told Loki that she was horrible. On the spur of the moment, Kisaragi suddenly kicked the Kobold King's face. After that, he told Hashigani to take Kakeru and the others away from there. He also said that he would take it down. However, Kakeru angrily told him to stop packing around because according to him, there was no way a piece of trash like him could beat it. But Kisaragi just ignored him. So Hashigani agreed with him and then she told him that she would leave it in his hands. But she also told him to not push himself. Meanwhile, Kisaragi mumbled and said that he wished Loki would keep those sorts of tricks to a minimum. Subsequently, he suddenly summoned Lufin. So Kakeru was startled and asked what the hell that thing was. However, Hashigani fell in love with Lufin since it was so cute. Now then, let's do this, as stated by Kisaragi. Then he ordered Lufin to deal with the kobolds. So Lufin instantly agreed with him. While Lufin was dealing with the kobolds, Kisaragi also immediately attacked the Kobold King. But it was really strong, so Kisaragi has been thrown away. However, Kisaragi was committed to defeat the Kobold King. Fortunately, he managed to slash the Kobold King's body this time. But it was too shallow. Out of the blue, the Kobold King unleashed his greatest power, which caused lightning around his body. However, Kisaragi wondered if he was able to copy Thundering Blade's skill. All of a sudden, the system appeared saying that the Thundering Blade skill had been successfully copied. Nevertheless, Thundering Blade's skill could envelop the user's weapon in pulsing lightning, enhances the strength and pierce rate of attacks. Moreover, it could temporarily hinder the target's movements. But as per Kisaragi, that would definitely be annoying to face up against. In a flash, Kisaragi suddenly called Lufin, so Lufin immediately used his powerful attack against the Kobold King. and luckily he managed to hit it. But surprisingly, the Kobold King was so strong that even Luffen's attacks couldn't affect him. According to Kisaragi, that was getting old. After that, he suddenly raised his sword and activated the Thundering Blade skill. Since that skill has one more effect aside from its weapon buff, it could harness the power of lightning to unleash an AoE attack. Furthermore, it could also stun any targets hit. In an instant, Kisaragi rushed to attack the Kobold King by using the new skill he got. As luck would have it, he managed to stab the heart of the Kobold King, and said that that was the end. So the Kobold King couldn't do anything but scream. Meanwhile, Hashigani was astounded by what she witnessed. However, Kisaragi told her that it was over. Good work, Kisaragi, as stated by Hashigani. But she wondered just who exactly Kisaragi was. At the present time, Loki asked Kisaragi if he must really go to school. In addition to her, entering a dungeon instead would be a much better use of his time. However, according to Kisaragi, he had to attend school in order to do dungeons. Besides, there was plenty of information regarding dungeons at his school. He might be able to find some clues about who could have placed the curse on his sister. But as per Loki, going into dungeons would be the best way to get stronger. However, she just told him to do as he saw fit. She also said that it seemed like there was something interesting in store at the academy. Meanwhile, Kisaragi asked her if she was leaving, but Loki just told him that she would be enjoying the show. At this moment, at the Tenjutsu Academy, in room 2A, Kisaragi suddenly entered the room. So his classmates were surprised after they saw him since most of them thought Kisaragi had died. Nevertheless, this guy on the left asked his friend how long that failure is going to keep trying to be an adventurer. So at the back of Kisagari's head, it seems like he was written off as being dead. But according to him, that was undoubtedly Kakeru's doing. Out of the blue, Hashigani suddenly greeted him. Then she thanked him again for yesterday. In an instant, Kisaragi also greeted her. Then he told her that he was the one who should be thanking her for the invaluable practice. On the other hand, Hashigani asked him how they tackle the intermediate rank dungeon named Above of the Dead as for their next dungeon. And in Hashigani's mind, she still didn't know the limits of Kisagari's strength, so she would be going to uncover his secrets. On the contrary, as per Kisaragi, Hashigani was definitely suspicious of him, so he pondered that he shouldn't have been so flashy, using his skills right in front of her. On the spur of the moment, this guy in the center suddenly asked why Hashigani was so friendly with that failure. In accordance with this guy on the right, Hashigani was insane for even thinking about going into a dungeon with Kisaragi. However, Hashigani just ignored them. Subsequently, she asked Kisaragi if he was free on that day, and if so, they could go right after school. Without warning, Kakeru suddenly entered the room, and in an instant, he told Kisaragi that he had some nerves showing up there. Nonetheless, Hashigani told Kakeru that she believed that was her line. Moreover, she told him that he was the one who had the nerve to talk to them. However, Kisaragi hopes that it doesn't turn into another hassle. But surprisingly, Kakeru suddenly commanded Kisaragi to fight him. Moreover, Kakeru said that he would be going to expose his lies for everyone to see. So Kisaragi was puzzled. On the contrary, Loki was just smiling at this point. Nevertheless, Kakeru asked Kisaragi if he hadn't cleared a dungeon solo. Then he told him to not tell him he was gonna run away. No, as stated by Kisaragi. But before he could finish talking, Loki suddenly told him to accept Kakeru's challenge. But as per Kisaragi, he didn't want to stand out any more than he already did. Plus, it was a hassle. However, Loki told him that it was to appease her boredom. After that, she told him that he should tell Kakeru to bring his buddies too. Furthermore, according to Loki, most of all, Kakeru got in his way at the last dungeon. So it was time to show him who was really in charge. So at the back of Kisagari's head, it would definitely be annoying if something like that happened again. Maybe Loki was right. In addition to him, it might be better to settle things there and now after all. So Kisaragi told Kakeru that he would fight him. He also told him that he could bring his two friends while they were at it. Kisaragi would take them all on. Moreover, Kisaragi said that he didn't want to hear any excuses when Kakeru lost. After all, as a result of what Kisaragi said, Kakeru got furious with him because according to him, the incompetent Sheetstain was talking down to him. On the other hand, according to Loki, there was no fun in a plain old fight, so she asked Kisaragi how they add on a wager. So in that case, Kisaragi said that if he wins, Kakeru would let Hashigani leave the guild, and make the JDMO approve the registration of her new guild. As the JDMO's director, Kisaragi asked if he was right that Kakeru's father had the authority to do that, more than that of Hashigani's dream any further. So Hashigani was stunned at this moment. However, while Kakeru was gritting his teeth, he called Kisaragi an arrogant little sheet. Then he told him that he would packing murder him. A few moments later, at the Tenjutsu Academy training grounds, Kisaragi said that whoever falls or surrenders first loses. Then he asked them if that was fine with them. Instantaneously, Kakeru said that it was fine, since Kisaragi was gonna lose either way. Out of the blue, Kakeru suddenly launched his first attack by using his powerful flames. However, Kisaragi easily managed to dodge it. But surprisingly, Yoshimura suddenly appeared and approached to attack in front of Kisaragi. Fortunately, Kisaragi was fast, so he still managed to dodge it. But Yoshimura told him to quit dodging. On the other hand, Hayato was preparing to attack Kisaragi by using his powerful skills. Luckily, Kisaragi managed to block it. But on the spur of the moment, Kakeru suddenly approached again to attack Kisaragi, and said that he would burn him to a crisp. After that, Kakeru used his firestorm technique, so Hashigani was stunned at this point since she was worried about Kisaragi. Meanwhile, as per Kakeru, once a failure is always a failure. Moreover, Kakeru bet Kisaragi would regret that in the afterlife. But unexpectedly, Kisaragi appeared as if nothing had happened. He also asked who said he was dead. Subsequently, Kisaragi activated his copycat skill, and immediately managed to successfully copy the Herculean strength skill and the Thunderbolt skill. On the contrary, according to Loki, it was very laughable since Kakeru thought that those weak flames could beat Kisaragi. However, Kisaragi asked her if he was right that Loki realized he would have died if he wasn't higher level. But Loki just told him to not lose at that moment, so Kisaragi said that she didn't have to tell him. After that, he suddenly approached to attack them and said that he would win. However, Yoshimura wants to keep up with Kisaragi, but surprisingly, Kisaragi managed to stop him easily. Then he instantly activated the Herculean strength skills, so these people were all shocked at this point. Subsequently, Kisaragi successfully managed to hit Yoshimura's stomach, then followed by a powerful kick, which causes Yoshimura to be thrown away. So Kakeru was trembling at this point. Nevertheless, Kisaragi spoke to him and said, "Let's put an end to this already, Kakeru." At the present time, Kakeru told Kisaragi not to get ahead of himself. After that, he suddenly used his powerful flames to execute Kisaragi. However, Kisaragi easily managed to block those attacks. So on the other hand, these people were all startled by what Kisaragi did. This guy on the left even asked if Kisaragi wasn't supposed to be a weakling. Meanwhile, as per Hashigani, that was like a walk in the park for Kisaragi. Back to the fight scene, Kisaragi asked Kakeru about what was wrong. He also asked him if he was giving up already. As a result, Kakeru got furious with him and even said that he would murder him. "I'm gonna packing execute you," Kisaragi angrily stated by Kakeru. However, Kisaragi just told him that he really shouldn't swear so much. But Kakeru asked him if he thought he was hot sheet just because he had beaten Yoshimura. So Kisaragi told him to cut the talk. Then he invites him to come to him. In an instant, Hayato approached to attack Kisaragi and said, "Go to hell, failure." But in the blinking of an eye, Kisaragi easily managed to dodge his attack and suddenly appeared in front of him. So Hayato was stunned at this point. All of a sudden, Kisaragi told him that he could go to his place. Subsequently, Kisaragi used the Thunderbolt skill against Hayato. In the meantime, according to Kisaragi, Kakeru was the last one standing. Nonetheless, at this moment, Kakeru figured out that Kisarari's imitation skill lets him copy the skills of others, so he copied Hayato's Thunderbolt skills. But on top of having a low success rate, he could only use the skill once before it was gone. So as per Kakeru, Kisarari's luck was about to run out. Then he told him that he would show him the difference between their skills. As a result, Loki laughed very hard and asked if Kakeru still thought that he could win. In addition to her, that was hilarious. Nevertheless, according to Kisaragi, he wanted to keep the fact that his skill evolved a secret. Unlike Copycat, the skills copied with imitation could only be used one time. That's why he would refrain from using Herculean Strength or Thunderbolt again. However, the painful ties from Kisarari's past, so he would sever them there and at that moment. Meanwhile, Kakeru told Kisaragi to not get cocky just because he beat them with a fluke. His big talk all you're good at, as stated by Kisaragi. Then he also told him that it was fine to run away if he was scared. On the spur of the moment, Kakeru rushed towards Kisaragi and said that he would cut his tongue straight out of his mouth. Fortunately, Kisaragi managed to block his attack, but he was suddenly stunned when Kakeru used his powerful flames against him. On the contrary, Hashigani felt worried about Kisaragi, right in the face. "How's it taste, bitch?" as stated by Kakeru. But he was surprised after he saw that Kisaragi was completely alive. "Good grief, didn't you try the same thing earlier?" as stated by Kisaragi. Moreover, Kisaragi asked him why he didn't learn a new trick. So Kakeru was speechless at this moment since he was still puzzled as to how it was possible. At this point, Kisaragi told him that his skill didn't hit him, so Kakeru was shocked by what he heard. In an instant, he told Kisaragi to stop joking around because according to him, he hit him point blank. In addition to him, Kisaragi couldn't have possibly avoided it. But as per Kisaragi, except that explosion wasn't caused by Kakeru's flames. It was caused by him. Subsequently, he asked him if he knew what that meant. So Kakeru instantly figured out that Kisaragi copied his skill. But he was still confused when Kisaragi managed to copy his skill. In addition to him, Kisagari's skill hardly ever worked until that day. Now then, let's bring this to a close. As stated by Kisaragi, in a flash, Kisaragi rushed towards Kakeru, so Kakeru immediately fired his flames at Kisaragi. But unfortunately for him, Kisaragi easily managed to block his attacks, so Kakeru was stunned when Kisaragi appeared in front of him. However, Kakeru was still able to strike his sword, but according to Kisaragi, it was too slow, and because of that, Kisaragi grabbed the opportunity to attack him from behind, and he successfully managed to hit him. However, Kakeru was still alive, but out of the blue, Kisaragi used his skill, then he ordered Kakeru to not move. So Kakeru was shocked since he couldn't move his body. Furthermore, he was also startled after he saw that Kisaragi managed to copy his skill again. Wait, Kisaragi, I'll surrender, as stated by Kakeru. However, Kisaragi just told him to not worry, because according to him, he would make sure it doesn't kill him. So Kakeru couldn't do anything but scream in pain. A few moments later, Kisaragi told Kakeru that he would lose, so Kakeru couldn't believe the outcome of their battle. He even asked how he could lose to a failure like Kisaragi. On the other hand, Kisaragi used his skill again to control Kakeru. Then he ordered him to keep his promise, so Kakeru replied and said that he would. Subsequently, Kakeru suddenly passed out. A few days after the duel, with the help of Kakeru's father, Hoshigani was able to safely leave the Bloodshine Guild as planned. And then just like that, the two of them created their very own guild. Well, since that's taken care of, shall we get going? As stated by Hoshigani. In an instant, Kisaragi asked her where. Straight away, Hoshigani replied and said that they were going to a dungeon, of course. However, Kisaragi asked her if it was another beginner rank one, but Hoshigani said no. Then she told him that they would try an intermediate rank dungeon, which is the abode of the dead. In addition to Hoshigani, it was the perfect start to their new journey. However, Kisaragi asked her if it was for real, but Hoshigani just laughed. Meanwhile, the recommended level for entering Abode of the Dead was level 25 or above. It was home to many troublesome undead-type monsters, so in Kisarari's mind, if he let his guard down for even a second, he would be dead meat, so he would have to be careful. Why the long face, Kisaragi-kun? As stated by Hoshigani. Right away, Kisaragi replied and said that it was nothing. Then he told her that he was just thinking about how they should be vigilant. Out of the blue, Kisaragi suddenly summoned Lufin, so Lufin immediately came out. As a result, Hoshigani looked in love again after he saw the Duji from earlier. On the contrary, Kisaragi told Lufin that they would be counting on him. So cute and precious. As stated by Hoshigani. Instantaneously, Kisaragi asked her if she wanted to give Lufin a hug, so Lufin was shocked by what his master said. However, Hoshigani asked if she could. After that, Hoshigani said that she couldn't get enough of that fluffy sensation. In addition to her, that was true happiness. However, Kisaragi felt sorry for Lufin. A few minutes later, Hoshigani asked Kisaragi if he could tell him more about Lufin. So Kisaragi instantly agreed with her and introduced Lufin to her. According to him, Lufin was a familiar that he summoned by using a skill. So as per Hoshigani, that sounds like a pretty useful skill. Then she asked him about when and where he copied it exactly. Nonetheless, Loki said that Hoshigani has sharp senses for a human, since she had noticed the change in Kisagari's skill. However, Kisaragi was wondering if that was really the time to be praising Hoshigani, and at the back of his head, he had to throw her off his trail somehow. All of a sudden, Hoshigani told him that he didn't have to force himself to answer because according to her, it was considered rude to pry into others' skills after all. Subsequently, Hoshigani said that she trusted the two of them, so she asked Kisaragi if she was right that he got her back. Right away, Kisaragi told her to leave it to him. As per Hoshigani, she would be in Kisagari's care, although he probably wouldn't need to protect her anyway. On the spur of the moment, these undead soldiers who were at level 23 suddenly appeared on the scene. In an instant, Hoshigani told Kisaragi that she would break through their ranks, so she told him to back her up. However, Kisaragi asked if it wouldn't be better to play it safe for that moment. But Hoshigani just told him to not worry because according to her, her sword was specially made for those guys. After that, she told him that she would show him what she meant. In the blinking of an eye, Hoshigani astonishingly managed to execute some of these undead soldiers using his powerful sword. On the other hand, according to Loki, the blade Hashigani was holding was a holy sword. It could slice through undead like butter. However, still, things would get dicey at that rate. So Kisaragi decided to help Hashigani out. And in a flash, he managed to hit this undead soldier. "You pushed ahead too far, Hashigani-san," as stated by Kisaragi. So Hashigani laughed and thanked Kisaragi for the support. However, as per Kisaragi, he guessed simply defeating them wasn't enough. In addition to him, these monsters didn't know when to give up. So according to him, that was kinda bad. Nevertheless, Loki was puzzled about what Kisaragi was doing. "It looks like you're struggling, Kisaragi-kun," as stated by Hashigani. Then she said that she couldn't afford to have him exhausted already, so she would help him out. In an instant, Kisaragi asked her if she was going to use her skill. So Hashigani replied and said that she hated to disappoint him, but not that time. Then she said that she would be using her sword instead. Furthermore, Hashigani said that she would show him a fraction of its power. All of a sudden, Hashigani used her power to make the holy sword to shine forth. So the atmosphere of that place suddenly brightened, which caused her to completely defeat the opponents. Meanwhile, Kisaragi was really amazed by the power of the holy sword. According to Hashigani, all she did was let out some of the holy sword's radiance. It was like a wave of light. In addition to her, to take out small fries like those, that much was plenty. On the other hand, Hashigani asked Kisaragi if he could collect the magic stones for her. Moreover, she said that she would stay there and watch his back with Luffy. A few minutes later, as per Loki, it took them long enough to get there. She thought she would die of boredom. On the other hand, Hashigani said that they got there with plenty of energy to spare. In addition to her, all that was left was to take down the boss. However, Kisaragi asked her about how they should go about fighting it. In an instant, Hashigani told him to not worry since she had got an idea. So Kisaragi asked her what the plan was. Well, just wait and see. I'll bring it down in one hit," confidently stated by Hashigani. At the present time, Kisaragi and Hashigani had finally met the Undead Lord, who was at level 38 with a level 3 skill called Undead Creator. Out of the blue, Loki suddenly laughed and asked Kisaragi if it wasn't quite the spectacular view. On the other hand, Kisaragi asked Hashigani if she could tell her strategy right at that moment. Straight away, Hashigani replied and said that she would wipe them out with her skill. Then she said that that was all there was to it. However, Kisaragi asked her if he was right that she was joking. But according to Hashigani, she was very serious. In addition to her, against that boss, having a prolonged fight was actually a bad idea because according to her, its skill, Undead Creator, was even more annoying than summoning Underling. Taking a long time to defeat it would put them in a bad spot. Meanwhile, Undead Creator is a skill that allows the user to freely create undead. It was also one of the strongest among all summon-type skills. As per Hashigani, her fully powered skill could cleanly wipe out all of the minions as well as the boss, but it requires some time to charge. So she asked Kisaragi if he could buy her some time. In an instant, Kisaragi replied and said that Luffy and him would buy her time. So he told her to not mess that up. However, Hashigani asked him about who he thought he was talking to. Then she said that she would end that without a hitch. At this moment, Kisaragi had activated his Flame Master skill. After that, he directly attacks these minions by using powerful flames. Nevertheless, according to Loki, those rabbles were summoned with the boss skill. They would disappear after taking a certain amount of damage. So as per Kisaragi, in that case, he asked Loki if he was right that he just had to do the same as always. Then Loki replied and said that in that world, simple was best. On the spur of the moment, Kisaragi suddenly activated the Thundering Blade skill. Subsequently, he immediately used it to exterminate these undead soldiers. From there on, Kisaragi jumped off and approached the Undead Lord. But unfortunately, the Undead Lord's personal guards managed to block Kisarari's attack. They even managed to do a counter-attack, which caused Kisaragi to be thrown away. In an instant, Luffy approached to help Kisaragi. As a result, an enormous explosion occurred in that area. At this moment, the Undead Lord suddenly used his skill to create more of his disciples. So Kisaragi asked if that was part of its skill. While Loki was laughing, he told Kisaragi that she supposed it opted for quality over quantity. In addition to her, its brains aren't half bad for a corpse. However, Kisaragi told Loki that that was no laughing matter. As per Kisaragi, to put it lightly, that situation was pretty bad. But Loki just told him to not make her repeat herself. Then she asked him who was the true enemy he must defeat. Moreover, she also asked him if it was that mere Undead Lord. Then she said that she didn't think so. So Kisaragi said that it was right. He also said that he could do it. Then he told Loki to just watch him. Then watch I shall. Entertain me, Tsukasa. as stated by Loki. Meanwhile, according to Kisaragi, wildly throwing his skills at it wouldn't work, so Kisaragi condensed the flames before releasing them, and directly hit this undead soldier. As per Loki, that was not bad. Meanwhile, according to Kisaragi, it was a skill that manipulates flames, after all, so he asked if he was right that using it creatively was important. All of a sudden, Kisaragi was surprised that even the monsters were shaking in their boots, but according to him, their fear was their downfall. After that, Kisaragi called Hoshigani. In an instant, Hoshigani thanked him since she was all ready to go at that moment. Mirror image, Paradise, Banquet of Champions, Land of the Forever Young. Turnanog, as stated by Hoshigani while using her power. Nonetheless, it is said that a skill's power could be influenced by the user's mental image. It takes time and leaves their defenses wide open, but the difference in strength could be worth the risk. So Kisaragi was really amazed again by the power of Hoshigani. Moreover, even Loki was amazed by her. So this is the power of our generation's #1 awakened, as stated by Kisaragi. So Hoshigani replied and said, well, mission complete. At this moment, as per Hoshigani, it was a piece of cake thanks to Kisaragi. However, Kisaragi said that he didn't do anything. In accordance with Loki, all Kisaragi did was buy time. Meanwhile, Hoshigani invited Kisaragi to head back because according to her, she would rather not stay in that moldy place any longer. But Luffy kept barking, so Kisaragi asked him what was up. On the contrary, Loki told Kisaragi to stay on his toes because according to her, it looks like the fight wasn't over yet. So Kisaragi was puzzled at this point. All of a sudden, a very bright purple light emerges behind him. So Kisaragi was stunned by what he saw, and he was suddenly shocked after he saw the archdemon with a level 50 and an unknown skill. An archdemon? What is an advanced rank boss doing here? Shockingly stated by Hoshigani. Out of the blue, the archdemon suddenly approaches them. In an instant, Hoshigani told Kisaragi to come to her. According to Kisaragi, that was a teleportation stone. Teleportation stones were items that could instantly transport a person to the dungeon gate in an emergency. Moreover, it was a valuable item, but using it was their only option right at that moment. So Hoshigani immediately used it to teleport themselves and save their lives.
At the present time, Hoshigani and Kisaragi were now facing the archdemon since the teleportation had failed. So their only option now is to fight this powerful monster. However, Kisaragi asked Loki if she was the one who did it. How cruel do you think I am? As stated by Loki. Moreover, as per Loki, she may be a Spartan mentor, but she would never spring such a nasty surprise on him. However, in addition to Loki, it was clear that someone did that deliberately. She also said that they had some nerves. So Kisaragi asked her if she was saying that they had to find a way to defeat that thing by themselves. In an instant, Loki said that that is the case. At this moment, Hoshigani asked Kisaragi if he was alright. Right away, Kisaragi said that he was fine and there was just something on his mind. Hee, spacing out at a time like this. How composed, as stated by Hoshigani. So Kisaragi just said that he wished he were. On the spur of the moment, the archdemon suddenly prepares to attack them. Straight away, Hoshigani asked Kisaragi about what would be their plan. So Kisaragi also asked her how much longer until she could use her skill again. Then Hoshigani replied and said that for about 5 minutes. So Kisaragi told her that she could stand back until her skill was ready too. But Kisaragi didn't even finish his words when Hoshigani interrupted him and said no. Then she also said that she would be going to fight with him. However, Kisaragi told her that if she did that, they could both be. But he didn't finish talking again, when Hoshigani suddenly asked him if he had forgotten already that she had that sword by her side. Subsequently, Hoshigani told Kisaragi that they were going to make it out of that together. So she asked him if he understood. Right away, Kisaragi replied and said that it was fine, but he told her to not do anything risky because according to him, they were going to need her skill in order to defeat that powerful monster. Out of the blue, the archdemon suddenly attacks Kisaragi. Luckily, he managed to block that attack. However, according to him, the archdemon wasn't taking that seriously. He just wanted to play with them. In addition to him, torture was in bad taste. On the spur of the moment, Kisaragi suddenly activated his Thundering Blade technique and said, when a cat corners a rat, the cornered rat would bite back. But unfortunately, their attacks were nothing against this powerful monster. Nevertheless, at this point, Kisaragi activated his Flame Master technique, and straight away, he launches it against the archdemon. Surprisingly, It still didn't even leave a scratch. Unexpectedly, Hoshigani suddenly appeared on the scene and directly slashed the archdemon. Fortunately, her sword was able to pierce the enemy. So Hoshigani was happy with the result. All of a sudden, the archdemon uses its power against Hoshigani. But as per Hoshigani, those little sparks were nothing. However, Kisaragi looked worried at this moment. After he saw the archdemon approach to attack Hoshigani. In an instant, Hoshigani prepares to block the monster's attack. But sad to say, she was unable to stop the monster from attacking. And because of that, Hoshigani was thrown away. However, she told Kisaragi that she was fine. And according to her, at that time, there was enough distance between her and the archdemon. Out of the blue, Hoshigani suddenly used her powerful technique and said, "Gilded Scales. Undefeated God of War. Holy Sword, release." Then Hoshigani managed to hit the archdemon. After that, she called Kisaragi. In an instant, Kisaragi also used his sword to slash the archdemon. Subsequently, he ordered Lufin to also attack the monster. And right away, Lufin followed his order. As a result, an enormous explosion occurred in that place. At this moment, Kisaragi asked if they did it. Then Hoshigani said that they couldn't have done it more perfectly than that. But unexpectedly, the archdemon was still standing as if nothing had happened. So they couldn't believe that their attacks didn't work. However, Loki said no. Then she told Kisaragi that their attacks certainly had an effect. But it simply recovered from the damage. In addition to Loki, high-ranking bosses all possess regenerative abilities. So Kisaragi asked her how they were supposed to beat it. Right away, Loki replied and said that it was simple. Either they continuously deal damage until the archdemon's healing can't be kept up, or defeat it in a single strike. However, Kisaragi asked her if that would be possible with Hoshigani's skills. In addition to Kisaragi, they would need more time until it was ready to use again. Out of the blue, Kisaragi suddenly told Loki that he had a request. Then he asked her to undo the seal on the Heavenly Authority technique. However, Loki was surprised by what Kisaragi said, so she asked him what he was talking about because according to her, the effects of the wordplay she used on him had already worn off long ago. So Kisaragi was shocked by what Loki said. Meanwhile, Kisaragi told Hoshigani that he had an eye. But he didn't even finish his words. When all of a sudden, the archdemon prepares to attack them again by using his powerful technique. So Hoshigani was stunned at this point. In the blinking of an eye, the archdemon launched its attack which caused a huge explosion again. So the archdemon looked satisfied at this moment. But surprisingly, Kisaragi activated his Heavenly Authority technique and said, "Time to dance, demon." After that, Kisaragi also said that that was where the real fight began. In this scene, Hoshigani asked Kisaragi about what skill that was. However, Kisaragi just told her that as soon as he gave the signal, he wanted her to use her skill. Moreover, Kisaragi told her that he would be counting on her. After that, Kisaragi suddenly attacks the archdemon by using his Heavenly Authority technique. Unfortunately, the archdemon managed to stop him. But out of the blue, Kisaragi suddenly kicked him which caused him to be thrown away. "I told you, didn't I? A cornered rat will bite a cat," as stated by Kisaragi. After that, he immediately activated his Flame Master technique, and directly used it against this powerful monster. In an instant, this archdemon used its power to block Kisarari's attack. So Kisaragi was stunned at this point. And according to him, as expected of an advanced rank enemy. Even with Heavenly Authority active, it was not enough to just sling his skills at it. Subsequently, Kisaragi jumped off. Then he approached to attack again the archdemon. Right away, this monster prepares to do a counterattack. And a huge powerful and deadly energy ball came out of his mouth. As luck would have it, Kisaragi managed to dodge the thing and went straight towards the archdemon to slash it. At this moment, Kisaragi told the archdemon that he was pretty nimble for being so bulky. On the other hand, Loki told Kisaragi to not forget that he was on a timer. In addition to her, Kisagari's body wouldn't last if he tried to use it again. So she told him that he must settle that within the minute. All of a sudden, Kisaragi activated his wordplay technique. Then he ordered this archdemon to not move. So even if this archdemon resisted, Kisagari's technique was more powerful. After that, Kisaragi used his Thunderbolt technique, followed by the Flame Master technique. Fortunately, He managed to hit the target. However, this archdemon was still alive, so Kisaragi had gotta keep up the attack. Suddenly, Kisaragi grabbed this monster, then kicked him back to the ground. At this point, this archdemon was confused about where Kisaragi went. Out of the blue, Kisaragi appeared behind this monster and said, "I'm over here, slowpoke." And when this archdemon turns around, Kisaragi immediately slashed him. On the other side, Hoshigani and Luffy were both happy with what they witnessed. But according to Kisaragi, it was not over yet. He needed more damage to guarantee that the archdemon would go down. On the spur of the moment, the archdemon suddenly used his dark lightning technique. So as per Kisaragi, that was the deciding moment. Then he commanded Hoshigani to use her skill. In spite of that, Hoshigani told Kisaragi that if she used it at that moment, he would be. But she didn't finish her words. When Kisaragi suddenly shouted and told her to just do it, he also told her to just believe in him. So Hoshigani followed Kisagari's order. However, she told him to not blame her if that hurt. After that, Hoshigani finally used her Tir na Nog technique and said, "Rest in peace, demon." On the other hand, Kisaragi also used his Vanargan technique at the same time. And because of that, a gigantic explosion happened again in that area. At this point, Hoshigani asked if they did it. More importantly, she asked if Kisaragi was okay. On the contrary, the archdemon was still standing. So Hoshigani was shocked and she couldn't believe that it still wasn't enough. All of a sudden, this monster prepares to attack them again. But surprisingly, Kisaragi activated his wordplay and immediately ordered this archdemon to not use skills. After that, Kisaragi also successfully managed to copy the Tir na Go technique of Hoshigani. Nonetheless, according to him, Hoshigani's skill was strong against a swarm of enemies. But against a single target, its firepower was dispersed and lost some of its strength. So in that case, Kisaragi should focus its power on a single strike. On the spur of the moment, Kisaragi suddenly activated the Tir na Nog technique. Then he directly uses it against the archdemon. Meanwhile, on the other hand, as per Hoshigani, not only did Kisaragi copy her skill, he reformatted it into a single target attack. As a result, they finally completely defeated the archdemon. You had me worried for a moment. But well done, Tsukasa. As stated by Loki, so Kisaragi just smiled and said that that was too close for comfort. At this moment, Hoshigani said that she couldn't believe Kisaragi was able to defeat even an archdemon. Then she said that Kisaragi saved both of their lives. So Kisaragi replied and said that he was just glad things ended well. In addition to him, if the last attack didn't defeat the archdemon either, he thinks they would have been goners. However, in Hoshigani's mind, when she was with Kisaragi, she felt like she could have the true adventure that she had always longed for. A few hours later, this woman at the front congratulated them on clearing the dungeon. Then she told them that the clearance reward has been transferred to their account, so she told them to confirm that it went through. According to Kisaragi, being an adventurer really was a dream come true. He also leveled up quite a bit from defeating the archdemon. However, as per Loki, Kisaragi still had a ways to go before he could rival a god. At this point, Kisaragi asked Hoshigani if she was sure about not reporting the archdemon. Right away, Hoshigani said that it was fine. In addition to her, they would never believe her anyway. But he asked Kisaragi to tell her about his real skill. So, Kisaragi was stunned at this moment. And in his mind, he guessed he couldn't hide it any longer. Nevertheless, as per Hoshigani, everyone calls Kisaragi an incompetent failure. So she asked him how exactly he fought his way that far. In an instant, Kisaragi told her to meet him on the rooftop after school tomorrow. Then he told her that he would tell her everything. Moreover, he also told her that it was just the two of them, where no one else could disturb them. Meanwhile, at the Goblin's Den F1, Kakeru was rehearsing furiously. He is very angry with Kisaragi. Out of the blue, someone suddenly said that Kakeru was quite worked up. Then asked him if something good happened. In an instant, Kakeru asked who the hell she was. He also asked her if she was looking for a fight. Then he told her that he would kill her. However, this lady just said that she likes it that Kakeru had the vigor to spout such harsh words, despite being a weakling. "What did you just call me?" angrily stated by Kakeru. After that, he suddenly used his technique to burn this lady to ashes. But in a flash, this lady easily managed to block Kakeru's attack. Then she said that with such lukewarm flames, they could hardly light a bonfire with those. So Kakeru was shocked at this moment. However, in addition to this lady, Kakeru does have potential. So she asked him if he desired power. Right away, Kakeru told her to get to the point already. But as per this lady, it was just a simple question. She was telling him that she could grant him the power he sought. The power to shake the very heavens and earth. Moreover, this lady told Kakeru that he may wield it to fulfill his desires. So Kakeru asked her if he would really be able to get stronger. Straight away, while this lady was laughing, she replied and said that without a doubt, Kakeru will become stronger than them all. There was no need to fret. Just entrust his body to her. On the contrary, Hoshigani asked Kisaragi if he would tell her what he had to say right at that moment. On the other hand, Loki asked Kisaragi if he was really going to tell her. So Kisaragi said that he could trust Hoshigani with it. So he replied to Hoshigani and said yes, he was the one who called her there, after all. Then Kisaragi explained to her that it all started when Kakeru tried to sacrifice him to the trap in the bonus room. In addition to Kisaragi, the trap sent him head first into a mythic rank dungeon. But he met a certain person there who granted him power, and so he was able to get out alive. So Hoshigani was really surprised with what she heard because according to her, the mythic rank dungeon is the highest rank that no one has ever cleared before. However, she asked Kisaragi about what kind of power. Straight away, Kisaragi handed her over his D card since he was expecting that sort of reaction. Moreover, seeing that would be the quickest way to explain. Nevertheless, Hoshigani asked him what the meaning of that was because according to her, his skill was supposed to be, imitate. So she asked how it became a copycat. In addition to Hoshigani, she had never heard of someone's skill changing. Unexpectedly, Loki spoke and said that that was the power she granted him. After that, she greeted Hoshigani. Then introduced herself to her as Loki. Moreover, she told her that it was a pleasure to make her acquaintance. Instantaneously, Hoshigani asked Loki what she was. So Loki just told her to relax because according to her, there was no need to be so alarmed. Subsequently, Loki told her that she may be a god, but she was not her enemy. However, Hoshigani was puzzled after Loki said that she was a god. So Loki explained to her that as the name would imply, mythic rank dungeons were domains ruled over by gods. After that, Loki said that she was the mighty ruler of the mythic rank dungeon, also known as Trickstar. But as per Loki, it was quite dull inside the dungeon. So in exchange for giving Kisaragi power, Kisaragi was showing her the outside world. So Kisaragi told Hoshigani that that was the reason why his skill evolved. However, Hoshigani asked Kisaragi if she was right that the true source of his strength lies elsewhere. In addition to her, even when facing utter despair after being betrayed by Todo Kakeru, Kisaragi never lost the will to fight. So she asked him why. She also asked him about what it was that kept him moving forward. In an instant, Kisaragi replied and said that in order to save his little sister Mayu, for her curse. That was the reason why he fought. But Hoshigani was confused about the curse. So Loki told her that Kisarari's sister was cursed by another god. In addition to Loki, whoever it was has an awful personality. In accordance with Kisaragi, that was why he had to keep fighting until he was able to find them. Meanwhile, in Hoshigani's mind, for Kisarari's family, that was a strong motivation, which is exactly why she could fully trust him. So Hoshigani told Kisaragi that she would help him in his quest to slay that god. So Kisaragi was stunned by what he heard. Furthermore, according to Hoshigani, she made a promise to her grandpa when she was still a child. That she would definitely clear a mythic rank dungeon one day. In addition to her, she would fulfill the dream that her grandpa was never able to accomplish. Besides, Hoshigani asked Kisaragi if he had forgotten that they started a guild, just the two of them. So she invited him to move and find that god and beat it up together. All of a sudden, Kisaragi smiled and thanked Hoshigani. However, as per Hoshigani, that was a bit too formal at that moment. Then she told him to just call her Rin and she would also start calling him Tsukasa too. Sure, in that case, I'll call you Rin from now on. As stated by Kisaragi, so Hoshigani replied and said that she would be in Kisarari's care, the same as Kisaragi. A few moments later, Mayu was really shocked and asked Kisaragi who that girl was. In an instant, Hoshigani greeted Mayu and introduced herself. Moreover, Hoshigani said that she recently started a guild with Kisaragi. So she hoped Mayu would treat her well. On the other hand, Kisaragi asked Mayu if she was feeling unwell somehow. Right away, Mayu said that of course not. In addition to her, her brother just brought an incredibly beautiful lady home with him. Wah, what should I do? I wasn't expecting this day to come so soon. Shockingly stated by Mayu. However, Kisaragi just told her to calm down because according to him, it was not like she was his girlfriend. But Kisaragi didn't even finish talking when Mayu suddenly said that she had to tell their mom and dad right away. But unexpectedly, Mayu suddenly coughs, so Kisaragi asked her if she was okay. But Mayu even vomits blood. So this is the curse that was placed on her. How awful, as stated by Hoshigani. At this moment, Mayu said that she guessed she got a bit too excited. However, Kisaragi told her that she didn't have to talk. Then he brings her to bed. But Mayu said that she was fine. She also said that she would feel better soon. Plus, she had to work on making dinner. Nevertheless, Hoshigani told Kisaragi to take Mayu to bed. Then she told her that she could leave dinner to her. However, Kisaragi wanted to talk. But Hoshigani just told him to not worry. Then she said that she would make some extra delicious food that would make Mayu feel better in no time. I said that I would help you out, didn't I? As stated by Hoshigani. Then she asked Kisaragi what he was trying to say. Moreover, she asked him if he was telling her that he didn't want to eat her homemade food. Right away, Kisaragi replied and said that not at all. Kisaragi also said that he would love to try her cooking. On the other side, Mayu told his brother that it looked like he was the type who could never say no. And these girls were both laughing. However, in Kisarari's mind, he needed to get stronger soon. Several days later, as per Kisaragi, it looks like Todo Kakeru was absent again on that day. So he wondered what he had been up to. On the spur of the moment, Hoshigani appeared on the scene and told Kisaragi that that was the bento she made for him. After that, Hoshigani invited him to eat lunch together later. Right away, Kisaragi thanked her, but he told her that maybe they should try to be a bit less. But he didn't even finish his words, when this guy in the center suddenly ordered him to come towards them. However, Kisaragi didn't know them, so he asked them who they were. But this guy didn't answer him. Instead, he told Kisaragi that he would be coming with them. And he had no right to refuse. At the present time, the man in the center asked for an apology from Kisaragi for suddenly calling him there. According to Kisaragi, that man was Todo Kakeru's father, the director of the JDMO, who approved the creation of Hoshigani's guild. Nevertheless, Todo Rentaro told Kisaragi that he understood how he must be feeling, but he told him that he didn't have to be so on guard. After that, Rentaro said that he wanted to ask Kisaragi about his son Kakeru's whereabouts. In addition to Rentaro, Kakeru has been missing for the past several days. So in Kisarari's mind, he guessed that was why Kakeru hadn't shown up at the school lately. However, Kisaragi asked Rentaro if he believed he had something to do with Kakeru's disappearance. As per Rentaro, he had heard that his son had subjected Kisaragi to some terrible treatment. So it was natural that he would be on the list of suspects. However, Kisaragi defeated Kakeru in a duel fair and square. With that, Kisarari's ties with him should have been severed, and that would be the end of it. And as for the dungeon Kakeru was last seen entering, Kisaragi had no records of visiting that place. Therefore, Rentaro had already eliminated Kisaragi as a suspect. So Kisaragi asked him why he brought him there. Moreover, he also asked him if he shouldn't just search for him there if he knew where he was last seen. Right away, Rentaro said that of course, they had already dispatched a search team. But according to him, it was not that simple. After all, the dungeon his son last entered was the intermediate rank dungeon, the Infernal Maw. Out of the blue, Hoshigani suddenly appeared on the scene and said that it was correct. So Kisaragi was shocked. Then he asked her what she was doing there. In accordance with Hoshigani, although Kakeru's name doesn't show up in the records. On the other hand, Rentaro told them that he wanted them to take a look at that. According to this man, that was a video log that was taken yesterday. In accordance with Rentaro, they had an eyewitness report in addition to that recording. However, they had no records of Kakeru's D-card entry scan. But Kisaragi was puzzled, so he asked if that was even possible. Instantaneously, Rentaro said no, it was not. And yet, the reality was that it still happened. Meanwhile, Hoshigani asked Rentaro if she was correct that Rentaro said he dispatched a search team. Then she asked him if they were able to find anything. Straight away, Rentaro replied and said that the search team was wiped out. So Kisaragi and Hoshigani were both startled by what they heard. In accordance with Rentaro, the second team was still searching. Subsequently, he told Kisaragi that the last person to fight Kakeru was him. After that, he asked him if he noticed anything odd at the time. But unfortunately, Kisaragi didn't. On the other hand, Loki told Kisaragi that they had stepped into a bigger mess than he realized. So Kisaragi asked her if she knew something. As per Loki, she could sense it from that brat in the recording. But Kisaragi was confused, so he asked her what she meant. In an instant, Loki replied and said that she could sense the presence of a god, and it was the very same one who cursed Kisagari's sister. So Kisaragi looked horrified by what Loki said. On the spur of the moment, Kisaragi suddenly stood up, so these people were puzzled about what he was doing. Meanwhile, in addition to Loki, it was only for an instant, but it was unmistakable. That was the presence of another god like herself. So Kisaragi said that he understood. Surprisingly, Kisaragi asked Rentaro to allow him to join the search effort. So Rentaro was shocked. Then he asked Kisaragi about what he said. However, according to this man at the back, Kisaragi couldn't do that. In addition to him, the entire search team was annihilated, and all of its members were level 30 or above. In accordance with Rentaro, if a novice like Kisaragi tried to join, that would only be sending him to an early grave. So he said that he couldn't allow that. But suddenly, Hoshigani said that she would go with Kisaragi. So she asked them if she was right that they wouldn't have any complaints. However, Rentaro still said no because according to him, even if Hoshigani used to be a member of Bloodsheen, sending just the two of them would be. But he didn't even finish talking, when Hoshigani suddenly interrupted him and said that they encountered an archdemon within the Abode of the Dead, an intermediate rank dungeon. In addition to Hoshigani, the one who defeated it was none other than Kisaragi. You defeated an advanced rank boss, shockingly stated by Rentaro. Then this man at the back said that it was impossible because according to him, an archdemon could never appear in an intermediate rank dungeon. However, as per this lady, after appraising the magic stone that they brought back, it was indeed confirmed to be that of an archdemon. But Rentaro was still in shock and still couldn't believe that a student did that. However, Rentaro eventually permitted the two of them to join the search. But this man angrily asked Rentaro if he had lost his mind. However, Rentaro told him that he could never have too many capable hands on the job, even if they were students. Subsequently, Rentaro suddenly bowed in front of Kisaragi and Hoshigani and said that he knew that it was shameful of him to ask, but he begged them to save his son. In an instant, Kisaragi and Hoshigani agreed with Rentaro. Then Kisaragi said that they would head to the dungeon right away. A few minutes later, Hoshigani asked Kisaragi about what was going on. She also told him to give her a proper explanation. So Kisaragi explained to her that Loki told him that the same god who cursed Mayu could be involved in that. However, Hoshigani asked him if that was true. So Kisaragi said that he couldn't be sure. But if it was, the second search team has most likely been executed by that time. As per Hoshigani, all they could do was pray that wasn't the case. So Kisaragi agreed with her. Then he invited her to move before they were too late. On the contrary, this guy was puzzled about what was happening. According to him, that was supposed to be a search and rescue mission, so he asked how it turned into that. On the other hand, we can see Todo Kakeru, who is completely different. All of a sudden, this guy activated his Gale Blade skill and used his Soar and Dance Winds technique against Kakeru. But unfortunately for him, Kakeru easily managed to block his attack. Is that all you've got? Get out of my sight. As stated by Todo Kakeru. As a result, an enormous explosion happened in that place. Meanwhile, according to this god, Kakeru's flames were burning nice and hot at that moment. Then she told him to let out all of that vile hatred festering within him. At this moment, Loki shockingly asked about what place that was because according to her, it was way too hot. Meanwhile, the infernal maw, is an intermediate rank dungeon that was close to being advanced rank. There was a giant leap in the level of the monsters there. So as per Kisaragi, it would get even hotter up ahead. However, in Kisarari's mind, he guessed Loki could still feel the heat even though she hadn't manifested there. At this point, Hoshigani told Kisaragi that she knew how he must be feeling right at that moment, but she told him that they should proceed with caution. She also told him to stay on maximum alert. Right away, Kisaragi replied and said that he knew. But if they didn't hurry. But he didn't even finish talking when Hoshigani suddenly interrupted him and told him that he needed to calm down because according to her, that dungeon was more difficult than the abode of the dead. In addition to her, if Kisaragi lost his cool, he would end up dead in an instant. Out of the blue, a level 33, lizard man, suddenly appeared in front of them. So Hoshigani told Kisaragi to be bold, but cautious. Then she told him that she had got him covered. Right away, Kisaragi thanked her, and after that, Kisaragi approached the enemy and said that he would go all out from the start. But surprisingly, this lizard man managed to stop Kisarari's attack, and immediately did his counterattack. Luckily, Kisaragi managed to block this monster's attack too, and because of that, Hoshigani grabbed the opportunity to slash this monster. In an instant, Kisaragi activated his Flame Master technique, and fired directly at the monster. As luck would have it, they managed to destroy this lizard man. Meanwhile, according to Kisaragi, he could definitely see why that dungeon was closer to advanced rank. On the spur of the moment, another level 36 lizard man and level 33 red panther appeared in the scene. So as per Hoshigani, there was no time to relax at all. After that, Hoshigani and Luffy suddenly approached to attack these monsters. And right away, Kisaragi used his ability and ordered these monsters to not move. As a result, Hoshigani successfully managed to slash the red panther. Subsequently, Kisaragi activated his Thundering Blade skill, and directly stabbed this lizard man with his sword. And because of that, the lizard man turned into pieces. After that, Kisaragi told his partner to keep moving. So Hoshigani instantly agreed with him. A few moments later, they finally arrived at that intermediate rank dungeon, the Infernal Maw mini-boss room. According to Kisaragi, the mini-boss was a swarm of wyverns. They were strong, and a pain to deal with too. It was just annoying that they could fly. Out of the blue, Kisaragi suddenly used his Thundering Blade skill to strike these monsters down. But unexpectedly, it seemed that they weren't affected by Kisarari's attack. Nevertheless, according to Loki, they may be a lesser species, but they were still wyverns. In addition to her, a mere shock wouldn't be enough to take them down. So at this point, Kisaragi was still figuring out what they should do. How cheekily, using tactics even though they were just monsters, as stated by Hoshigani. Then Kisaragi said that they would start by dragging them down to their home turf and they would work from there. After that, Kisaragi used his ability, and ordered all of these monsters to fall. Subsequently, Kisaragi prepares to attack, together with his team. On the other hand, Kisaragi successfully managed to cut this monster. But all of a sudden, he was stunned, after he saw the tail of this monster coming towards him. Fortunately, he managed to block it in time. However, according to Hoshigani, there was no end to them. In addition to her, they wouldn't last at that rate. But on the other hand, Hoshigani was amazed by what Kisaragi showed. On the spur of the moment, Kisaragi suddenly used his firestorm technique. But as per Loki, that wouldn't do anything against fire-resistant enemies. However, Kisaragi said that if it were only fire, he would agree. But Kisaragi suddenly used his Thunderbolt skill to course through these monsters. Meanwhile, Hoshigani couldn't believe that Kisaragi layered a skill on top of another skill. It must be thanks to his copycat skill that he was able to pull it off. After that, Kisaragi also used the Tir na Nog technique and said, "Face the judgment of the stars." On the other side, Hoshigani felt the overwhelming power of Kisaragi. However, she wondered if she was capable of the same thing. But she said that definitely not. A few minutes later, as per Hoshigani, they were almost at the boss's room. So Loki told Kisaragi to be careful because according to her, she had a bad feeling about that. At this point, Kisaragi and Hoshigani looked horrified after they saw the corpses of the search team. Surprisingly, Luffy found a person who was still alive. Good, he's still breathing. But who could have done this? As stated by Hoshigani, all of a sudden, this guy said that it was him, the one who attacked them. So Kisaragi and Hoshigani were both stunned at this moment, after they figured out that it was none other than Todo Kakeru. Nonetheless, Hoshigani asked if that was really him because according to her, the aura surrounding him was far too different. Meanwhile, Kisaragi told Kakeru that he was glad he was still in one piece. Moreover, he told him that everyone was worried about him. Then he invited him to head back. However, in Kisarari's mind, he had so many questions for Kakeru, but they should get out of that dungeon first. Surprisingly, Kakeru just smiled, and all of a sudden, a gigantic dragon approached them. So Kisaragi and Hoshigani were both stunned at this moment. On the other hand, Kakeru tried to leave the area, but Kisaragi stopped him. Then he asked him where he thought he was going. But unexpectedly, Kakeru's body gradually disappeared, so Kisaragi was startled. However, Loki interrupted him, and told him that it was coming. So Kisaragi was really puzzled about what was going on there. A few moments later, Kisaragi successfully managed to defeat the monster. However, he is still thinking about Kakeru. On the other side, Hoshigani asked him if he was alright. Right away, Kisaragi replied and said that he was fine. After that, he asked her about the search team. According to Hoshigani, they were unconscious, but they were all alive. However, she also said that the bigger problem was that guy they just saw. Then she asked again if she was right that it was Kakeru. In Kisarari's mind, there was no mistaking it. That was definitely Kakeru, but he wondered where he ran off to. All of a sudden, Loki said that Kakeru was in the boss room. In addition to her, what Kisaragi saw was only a phantom. His real body was in the boss's room the entire time. So she told him to not fret because he was still alive. At this point, Kisaragi said that honestly, he had no idea what was going on. However, Hoshigani was confused about what he was saying, so she asked him what was wrong. In an instant, Kisaragi explained to her that according to Loki, Kakeru was inside the boss's room. So he asked her about what they should do. In Hoshigani's mind, Kakeru's level was lower than the search team members that he wiped out. Fighting them at the same time as the boss would be too dangerous for him. Out of the blue, Kisaragi suddenly said that he would be going to the boss's room. Then he told Hoshigani that she should head back for that moment and call for backup. But Hoshigani stopped him because according to her, it was too dangerous no matter how they looked at it. However, Kisaragi said that he knew it was reckless. But even so, he couldn't let that chance go to waste. So Hoshigani just said that she understood. And in that case, she would come with him. Moreover, she told him that she wouldn't let him walk into dangerous territory alone. However, Kisaragi asked her what they would do about the members of the search party or calling for backup. On the spur of the moment, this guy suddenly said that he could call for backup. Then he told them to not worry about them. He also told them to just focus on the enemy in front of them. So Hoshigani just told him to just use that. But this guy asked her if she was sure. As per Hoshigani, those were unforeseen circumstances. So she told him to not worry about it. Besides, that was a spare. Suddenly, this guy bowed and said sorry to them. Then he also said that he was in their debt. On the other hand, Kisaragi asked Hoshigani if she really needed to lie and tell the person that it was a spare. So Hoshigani replied and said that the person wouldn't have accepted it otherwise. Subsequently, she told him that at that moment, since there was no longer any cause for concern, she asked him if they should get going. Right away, Kisaragi agreed with her. In this scene, we can see a level 45 salamander. At this point, Kisaragi told Kakeru to take off his hood. In an instant, Kakeru followed what Kisaragi said. As per Kisaragi, Kakeru was like a completely different person. However, Loki told him to not let his guard down because according to her, that wouldn't be as easy as his duel. So Kisaragi said that he knew. In addition to him, if it comes down to it, he wouldn't hold back. Meanwhile, Hoshigani asked him how they should handle that. So Kisaragi told her that he would take the boss and he would leave Kakeru to her and Luffy. Got it, I'll defeat him quickly then come to help you. As stated by Hoshigani. However, Kisaragi told her to not let her guard down because according to him, that wasn't the Kakeru they knew. Nevertheless, as per Hoshigani, that man really was a troublemaker. So Kisaragi said that he couldn't agree more. On the spur of the moment, The salamander suddenly prepares to attack them. So Kisaragi, Hoshigani, and Luffy also approach to attack their enemy. In a flash, Kisaragi and this monster collided. On the contrary, Hoshigani told Kakeru that she would ask her that just in case. Then she asked him if there was any chance he would come back with them quietly. But Kakeru didn't even speak. Instead, he prepares to attack her. So Hoshigani took that as a no. And in that case, she wouldn't hold back. Moreover, she told him that she would crush him with all her might. And he could tell her all about what happened afterward. All of a sudden, Kakeru made his first move. Fortunately, Hoshigani and Luffy were fast, so they easily managed to dodge that attack. And instantaneously, Luffy and Hoshigani did their counterattack. Luckily, Hoshigani managed to slash Kakeru's body. After that, Hoshigani approached to attack him again and said that she was not done yet. But surprisingly, Kakeru just smiled as if it was nothing to him. And in the blinking of an eye, a black aura suddenly came out from Kakeru's body. So Hoshigani and Luffy were both stunned at this point. After that, Kakeru used his power again to attack them. As a result, an enormous explosion occurred in that place. At this moment, Hoshigani asked Kisaragi if he defeated the boss already. But Kisaragi replied and said, "Sorry, not yet. Far from it." Meanwhile, according to Loki, it seems that her intuition was correct. Then she told Kisaragi to brace himself because according to her, Kakeru's power was unmistakably identical to the one who cursed Mayu. So Kisaragi was stunned by what Loki said. However, the monster was furiously looking at Kisaragi. Then Kisaragi asked Loki if this wasn't another one of her jokes. But Loki told him not to tease her and this is most definitely not a joke. She added and told Kisaragi to defeat the enemy in front of him with all of his might, and not to think about the consequences. Otherwise, he will die. At that moment, Kisaragi agreed with her and said that he'd give it his all. Hoshigani asked Kisaragi how should they fight them and she suggested that they focus on both targets. Then Kisaragi told her that they'd do that. As they are now, it's too risky to divide their firepower. But Hoshigani was confused and she asked Kisaragi what does she mean by that. According to Kisaragi, that dark aura is the same power as the one who cursed Mayu. Then Hoshigani said that she guessed that meant that they'd be fighting against the servants of a god. And Kisaragi told her yeah, which is why he won't hold back and they'll send them flying with a bang. Instantaneously, Hoshigani raised her hand and said that she got it. In that case, she's going to get serious. At that moment, when Hoshigani raised her hand there was a magic of mirror image, paradise, the banquet of champions, and the land of the forever young. Then Hoshigani said maximum output. All of a sudden, Hoshigani attacked their opponent. Then in an instant Kisaragi and Luffy were heading to the fire, and Kisaragi told Luffy that they're up next. At this point, Kakeru was laughing while he was heading to them. In an instant, Kakeru attacked Kisaragi, but Kisaragi managed to block his attacks. Unfortunately, Luffy was hit and Kisaragi was worried at that moment. Then Kakeru was just smiling while he was attacking them. Nonetheless, he used his all force to attack them. But suddenly, Kakeru removed his sword and he just smirked at Kisaragi. Then there was a flashes of lightning at Kisaragi's hand and he gritted his teeth, and he told Kakeru to snap out of it already. All of a sudden, Kisaragi activated his Thunderbolt skill and he attacked Kakeru. Then he glanced at Hoshigani and called her. And Hoshigani said Holy Sword release. Nonetheless, she told Kisaragi to leave it to her, and she'd defeat the boss in one shot. But suddenly, Kakeru was heading to her while calling her name, and Hoshigani was just puzzled. Then both of them were shocked at that moment. However, Hoshigani blocked his attack using her sword. Nevertheless, Kakeru kicked her sword and Hoshigani was just shocked. Then Kakeru's Flamemaster skill was activated. Upon seeing the Flamemaster skill of Kakeru that was heading to her, Hoshigani was startled and she just gritted her teeth. Unfortunately, she was hit and Hoshigani felt the pain at that moment. Kakeru was just laughing and said burn for me. Then there was a light that occurred on the Flamemaster that stabbed at Hoshigani. All of a sudden, it explodes and Kisaragi calls Hoshigani. At this point, Hoshigani almost lost consciousness. Then she said sorry to Kisaragi and she told him that she let her guard down. Instantaneously, Kisaragi and Luffy were both heading to her. Then Kisaragi asked Hoshigani if she was alright, and Hoshigani told him yes. But she said sorry to him again and said that she didn't think she could fight anymore. At that moment, Kisaragi clenched his fist and he told Hoshigani to just get some rest and leave the rest to him. Then he put down Hoshigani and he told Luffy to watch over her. 1 minute is all he needs. All of a sudden, Kisaragi was enraged and he was surrounded with blue lightnings. Then Kisaragi told Kakeru that he had come here. At this point, he was heading to the lizard, and in his mind, he didn't know if this would last for long. But he extended his hand to the lizard and said, "Don't move, lizard." Suddenly, the system notified that he had activated a wordplay skill. Instantaneously, he punched Kakeru in the face, and he split blood at that moment. Then they both looked at each other. In an instant, Kakeru released his Flamemaster skill and he was heading to attack Kisaragi. But Kisaragi used his skills and blocked the Flamemasters that were heading to him. All of a sudden, it explodes. And Kisaragi was heading to his opponent at that moment. Then Kisaragi attacked Kakeru and they were surrounded by flashes of lightning. At that moment, their swords collided and Kisaragi was mad at Kakeru. Instantaneously, there were Flamemasters behind Kisaragi and he was shocked. Nonetheless, a status window appeared stating that the Thundering Blade skill had been activated. In an instant, Kisaragi blocked all the Flamemasters that were heading to him. Upon seeing it, Kakeru was startled and puzzled. All of a sudden, Kisaragi kicked Kakeru in his chest. Then Kakeru was speechless while he was touching his chest. According to Kisaragi, now that Kakeru was staggered, this is his chance. At this point, Kakeru was startled, and suddenly Loki said sleep. In an instant, Kakeru fell on the ground and he fell asleep at that moment. In an instant, the salamander roared in front of Kisaragi. According to him, 45 seconds until the heavenly authority's time is up. And it's time to go all out. Instantaneously, Kisaragi was heading to the salamander. Then the salamander was furiously looking at him. Abruptly, Kisaragi attacked this salamander and the salamander screamed at that moment. Then Kisaragi took a step, and said face judgment from the stars. Suddenly, a gigantic explosion occurred in his front. At this point, the salamander and Kisaragi were heading to each other. Then Kisaragi immediately raised his sword. In an instant, he slashed the salamander. But unfortunately, his sword was broken. Then he was looking at the salamander who was groaning in pain. Instantaneously, Kisaragi extended his hand and he was about to end the salamander. But Kisaragi was shocked and puzzled when his skill didn't work. All of a sudden, a status window appeared and it stated that his skill of Heavenly Authority effect had expired. At this point, the salamander roared and Kisaragi crashed on the ground. Then Kisaragi was stunned and in his mind, the Heavenly Authority's time ran out, and he'd lost his weapon. At this rate, he's going to die. But suddenly, Loki came and she told Kisaragi that good grief, he was hopeless and he'd help him just this once. In an instant, Loki showed her weapon. Then she told Kisaragi to use this. She put it on the ground and said it was the ace up his sleeve. Upon seeing that weapon, Kisaragi was just shocked and speechless. Then his eyes widened when he looked at the sword in his front. Instantaneously, Kisaragi grabbed the weapon and he thanked Loki at that moment. Then Kisaragi said that with this, he could keep on fighting. At this point, Luffy and Hoshigani were looking at the sword and it was surrounded with flames. According to Hoshigani, she senses a power that rivals her holy sword, or maybe even surpasses it. She was confused about what is that sword. However, Loki told Kisaragi that the mythical flame consumes all of creation, Levitain. She smirked and said that now, Kisaragi can give his enemy a taste of the fire that turns even gods to ashes. Then Kisaragi replied and said right. He'd got this. At that moment, Kisaragi faced the salamander and he was holding tightly the sword. Instantaneously, Kisaragi was going to the salamander. Then he immediately slashed the salamander's hand. At this point, the salamander's blood was splattered and Kisaragi was stunned. Then the salamander's hand was cut off. Nonetheless, Kisaragi raised the weapon, and the salamander's tail was moving. Abruptly, Kisaragi slashed the tail, and he successfully cut off the salamander's tail. Right away, the salamander was furious, and Kisaragi immediately moved away. Then Kisaragi told Loki that this blade really was something else. Upon hearing him, Loki laughed and said of course it is. It's my weapon of choice, after all. Nonetheless, the salamander roared and there was a fireball in his mouth. All of a sudden, the salamander attacked Kisaragi. Then Kisaragi prepared himself for that attack. He looked carefully at the salamander's attack. Then he immediately swung his sword and blocked the attack. At this point, the salamander's fireball was heading to Kisaragi. But the fireball was going back to salamander. Then it creates a huge fire. And suddenly, it explodes in front of Kisaragi. Upon seeing it, Hoshigani said that it was amazing while Luffy was startled at that moment. Then Loki smiled and said that Kisagari's only drawn out about 1/3 of Levitane's full power and he still has a ways to go. But the salamander suddenly roared at that moment. Instantaneously, Kisaragi jumped off and he told the salamander to shut up and die already. Then he used his full power of the Levitane and attacked the salamander. Fortunately, he managed to hit the salamander. Then the salamander crashed into the ground and it exploded. At this point, the salamander disappeared, and Kisaragi shows a shining stone in the center. Nonetheless, Hoshigani grabbed her weapon and she told Kisaragi that she actually did it. As for Kakeru, he's safe and good. She guessed that settled everything. Suddenly, Loki sighed and said that if Kisaragi struggled against a monster of this caliber, being able to slay a god was a dream within a dream. Upon hearing her, Kisaragi smiled and he told Loki that she was as harsh as ever. But he won because of her, and he thanked Loki for that. Then Loki told him that he'd better not neglect his training and it's not like he'd be able to help him. All of a sudden, they were shocked and puzzled. At this point, there was a lady who came with a long tail behind her. Then Kisaragi asked her who she was and at that moment, Loki was speechless. This lady told Loki that she couldn't believe that she'd aligned herself with a human. She was at a loss for words, and she asked Loki how far he'd fallen. Loki was furiously looking at her and told Vixen that she was still as crafty as ever. Then Luffy and Hoshigani were both shocked at that moment. According to Hoshigani, a woman is a monster in the form of a human. However, Kisaragi already knows something about Vixen. But Vixen told him to keep his mouth shut and she asked him who gave him permission to speak. All of a sudden, Vixen attacked them. Then in an instant, Loki clapped her hand. Suddenly, Kisaragi is covered with Loki's power. Then Loki told Vixen don't be so childish. Unless she'd like a fight to the death between two gods. Upon seeing Loki, Kisaragi was shocked and he was confused about what is that form. Nonetheless, Vixen told Loki that she'd grown quite a bit compared to that unsightly appearance before. But Loki told her that this room was filled with mana after all and she was still far from reaching her full power. But this form is more than enough to kill her. Nevertheless, Vixen said kill me. How hilarious. Do you intend to fight me while covering for those two deadweights? All of a sudden, Vixen transformed and she told Loki that she'd grown tired of her insults. Prepare to die, wicked god. At that moment, Kisaragi was shocked and confused if that was her. At the same time, he was curious if Vixen was the one who cursed Mayu. Then Loki told Kisaragi that Vixen's name was Tamamo no Mae. She's the lord of the mythic rank dungeon, 9 Tales of Beauty. As well as the culprit who pulled the strings behind this incident, and the god who cursed his precious sister. After he heard Loki, Kisaragi grabbed the weapon and said, I see, so she's the one who hurt Mayu. At that moment, Kisaragi was mad. But Loki told him to calm himself. As he is now, he stands no hope of winning against her. Nevertheless, Kisaragi couldn't hold back and he was suddenly heading to Vixen. Upon seeing him, Loki was shocked. At this point, Kisagari's eyes had a flame and he gritted his teeth. But Vixen just smirked at that moment. Then instantaneously, Kisaragi swung his sword. But Vixen blocked it and Kisaragi was shocked and puzzled. Then Vixen told him no strength whatsoever. Abruptly, Vixen swung her weapon and luckily Kisaragi dodges it. Suddenly, Vixen pushed him and Kisaragi was startled. Then he crashed on the ground. Hoshigani was shocked while she was looking at Kisaragi. Then Loki said that he already told him so. However, a status window appeared and it stated that the skill Flamemaster had been activated. Instantaneously, Kisaragi was surrounded with his Flamemaster skills. Then Kisaragi said fly, and all the Flamemasters were heading to Vixen. At this point, Vixen was just startled and she was confused about Kisagari's fire skill. Then he opened his fan and said that in the end, it's just for show. All of a sudden, she swung her weapon. In an instant, the Flame Master turned back, and all of them were going back to Kisaragi. Unfortunately, He was being hit by his own skills. Then it suddenly explodes. Hoshigani was shocked and she was confused that Vixen reflected Kisagari's skill. According to her, it's the ability of her iron fan, and honestly, it's infuriating, no matter how many times she sees it. It's nearly impossible for a human's skills to break through Vixen's defense. However, Kisagari picked up his sword and said damn it. Then Vixen told him that he was still able to stand. His spirit is praiseworthy. However, he won't be able to defeat him with spirit alone. Upon hearing her, Kisagari was stunned and he was speechless at that moment. Then Vixen said that she sees now, the adventurer she killed back then. This is why humans are so interesting. All of a sudden, Kisagari was shocked and he asked her what the hell she was talking about. But Vixen told him that if he liked to know, he'd just have to defeat her. Instantaneously, Kisagari was heading to her, and he looked too mad at that moment. But in an instant, Vixen's tail grew bigger and Kisagari was puzzled. Then Vixen's attacked him and Kisagari just gritted his teeth. All of a sudden, there was something blew up. Then Kisagari vomits blood at that moment. At this point, Kisagari was coughing and he was panting. Then Vixen told him that he was softer than cotton candy. All of a sudden, she extended her hand and there were flames on it. Then she told Kisagari that she shall curse him as she did with his sister and she will see how they both suffer in agony. Vixen was about to kill Kisagari. But suddenly, Hoshigani came and she pushed Kisagari at that moment. Unfortunately, she was hit by Vixen's attack. Then she fell to the ground, and Kisagari was worried of her. Kisagari immediately grabbed Hoshigani and he was telling her to answer him. But Hoshigani had already fainted. All of a sudden, a status window appeared, and it stated that warning. You have been afflicted with a curse by the skill Dark Arts. Remove it immediately or defeat the skill's user. At this point, Vixen just smirked and said that it was such a beautiful display of friendship, or perhaps it's love in this case. Although, it remains utterly boring either way. After hearing her, Kisagari was mad and he told Vixen to shut up. Then Vixen told him what adorable bloodlust. And why doesn't he get even angrier? That woman will die if he doesn't hurry. Instantaneously, there was a chain that bound at Vixen and Loki told her to shut her mouth. Abruptly, Loki kicked her, and Vixen was startled. Then Loki told her that she played around too much. All of a sudden, Vixen crashed on the ground. Then Kisagari was stunned and startled when he saw it. But Loki told him fool. He'd mistaken recklessness for bravery and just let her handle this. Suddenly, Vixen appeared in front and told her that surprise attacks were only for cowards. She supposes that suits a weakling like her. Nevertheless, Loki told her that it was rich coming from a coward who thinks she's sly. Sneaking around behind the scenes is all good for toilet insects. All of a sudden, both of them were laughing together. Then suddenly, they were both enraged. Instantaneously, they were fighting and the ground cracked at that moment. Loki punched Vixen but she managed to dodge it. Then Vixen attacked Loki using her weapon and Loki avoided it. Then Loki immediately released her chain. But Vixen suddenly blocked it and told her that she always was an odd one. However, Loki told Kisagari to use this chance to escape with Hoshigani and the little one. But Kisagari told her that Vixen was the one who hurt Mayu. Nevertheless, Kisagari didn't finish his words and Loki told him that he hadn't seen the difference in strength and he stood no chance of winning. All of a sudden, Vixen was heading to Loki and said that she couldn't have said it better herself. But Loki immediately avoided her, and something crashed on the ground. Then Loki told Vixen that she was still as quick as ever. But at the back of her mind, that was a bit clumsy of her. Nevertheless, Vixen told her that it was boring and she'd grown weak. Then Loki called her little fox and asked her why she hadn't killed her already. According to Loki, it was a cheap provocation. Suddenly, Vixen turned back and Loki was mad at her, and she asked her if she was leaving already. Then this little fox glanced at them and she told Loki to chase her if she'd like. But she'd best be prepared to die if she did. Upon hearing her, Kisagari was mad and he was holding a sword. Quit joking around, I won't let you get, Kisagari stated. Nevertheless, Loki grabbed his hand and told him that he couldn't defeat her as he is now. Then she asked him how many times he had to say it, and she told Kisagari that he was a fool. But Vixen just smirked and there was an envelope in her front. Then she told Kisagari that if he wished to lift the curse upon his beloved sister and precious friend, Come to the mythic rank dungeon, 9 Tales of Purity. Then she threw the envelope at that moment. Nonetheless, she added and told Kisaragi that she didn't have much time left, though. And they'll both die if he dilly-dallies for too long. Then Vexen immediately left and Kisaragi was mad at that moment and said that he'd going to screw her. But Loki told him to calm down. Nevertheless, Kisaragi told her to let go of him and he didn't care if he died trying. But Loki used her skill and said sleep. At this point, Kisaragi gritted his teeth and said that she'd never forgive Tamamo no Mae. Then she already fell asleep and Loki said that Vexen should have killed them there when she had the chance. And she'd make her regret this. Meanwhile, Kisaragi just woke up. Then he suddenly shouted and said screw you. But he was stunned when he noticed that he was on the bed. He covered his face and he was confused about where he was and according to him, he was just in a dungeon. However, Loki was looking at him and told him that it was good to see him awake. But Kisaragi was shocked when he heard her. All of a sudden, he grabbed Loki's shoulder and asked her why did she stop him. Then Loki told him that it was because he would have died. In addition, she told Kisaragi that sorry for laying this on him right after he woke up, but there were 2 things that he needed to know. Then Loki asked him which would he like to hear first, the good news or the bad news. Meanwhile, Hoshigani was still unconscious at that moment. Then Kisaragi and Loki visited her in her room. Loki told him that Hoshigani was afflicted by Tamamo's curse when she covered him. Suddenly, Kisaragi remembered the moment when Hoshigani pushed him and she was the one hit by Tamamo's attack. Nonetheless, Loki told him that his sister's condition hadn't changed, but if Tamamo was telling the truth, they didn't have much time left. All of a sudden, Kisaragi turned back and he looked so mad. But Loki told him to wait and he's not done talking. At this point, Kisaragi was about to open the door, but Loki told him that he said that there were 2 things he should know. And he hasn't heard the good news. After he heard Loki, Kisaragi stopped and he asked her what she meant by good news. Then Loki told him that the wretched 9-tailed fox Tamamo no Mae, there was a way to defeat her. Upon hearing her, Kisaragi was shocked at that moment. Then he immediately turned back and told Loki to tell him what is the way. But Loki said that in order to accomplish it, he'd have to forsake his humanity. Then she asked Kisaragi if he was prepared to do that. At this point, Kisaragi clenched his fist and he told Loki that she should already know his answer by now. In order to defeat her, he'd do whatever it takes. Very well, I understand your resolve, Loki stated. All of a sudden, Loki raised her hand. Then in an instant, there was a huge door behind her, and she told Kisaragi that in that case, he needed to follow her. The door suddenly opened and Loki was about to enter but Kisaragi asked her where are they going. Then Loki told him that in the majestic hall, only those chosen by the gods were permitted to enter the Valhalla. It shall serve as his training ground. Meanwhile, at the heavenly sanctuary, Valhalla. At this point, they arrived at the Valhalla. Then suddenly, Kisaragi was panting and he fell on the floor. He told Loki that the air felt heavy. And Loki sighed at that moment. She told Kisaragi that good grief, she was concerned for his future. All of a sudden, someone came and told Loki that she'd already returned. Then Loki called him Hildur and said that it's been some time. Indeed it has, Master Loki. I'm relieved to see you in good health, Hildur stated. Then Loki smiled and said, of course, I'm glad you're doing fine as well. At this point, Hildur was confused and he asked Loki who was this man. Then Loki told him that this was Kisaragi Tsukasa, her partner. And their relationship is nothing more than that. Nonetheless, she told Hildur that she would like him to train Kisaragi. She cares not how he accomplishes it, until he's able to fend himself against them, and she leaves Kisaragi in his charge. Upon hearing her, Kisaragi was shocked and asked what. Then Hildur asked Loki what is the meaning of this. But Loki just grinned and told Hildur that there's no need to think about it too deeply. He may treat it as an amusing diversion from his usual tasks. Then Hildur said I see, in that case, I will gladly take him. But Kisaragi was annoyed and he told Loki that this wasn't what she promised. He also asked her if she was lying when she called that this place is a training ground. Nevertheless, Loki told him that it was no lie. This is certainly a place for training. However, it's up to him how much he gains out of it. If he wishes to save them, train like his life depends on it. Or else, how will he defeat Tamamo no Mae if he fails there? Nonetheless, Hildur asked Loki if she was referring to Tamamo no Mae, the 9 Tails of Purity, and if she intended to fight a god. Then Loki told him that Kisagari's sister and comrade had been afflicted by that fox's curse, and they'd both die unless he defeated her. I have to get stronger for their sake, as well as mine. That's why I've come here, Kisagari stated. Then Hildur said, I see, so that is your reason. And Loki told him that with that being said, she left Kisagari to him. Meanwhile, Hildur said that rather than treating this as a mere diversion, he shall render his aid in order to slay the 9 Tails of Purity. However, Hildur is a level 80 and his skill is martial mastery inferior. Then he told Kisagari that he can be somewhat clumsy, so he must take care not to die. And Kisagari told him to bring it on. Meanwhile, at the Heavenly Sanctuary, Valhalla training ground, Hildur told Kisagari that his training would be simple, and at that moment, Hildur's skill of martial mastery had been activated. Then he pointed his sword at Kisagari and told him that he must defeat him, that was his only task. Nonetheless, Kisagari was holding his weapon and said, got it. Then Hildur told his master Loki at her mark, and Loki said that it would be tedious. At this point, Hildur and Kisagari were both ready. Then Hildur called Loki, but Loki asked them if can't they just start on their own. As she stated, this is why she dislikes dealing with warriors. However, they both raised their swords and Loki suddenly told them to begin. All of a sudden, they both attacked each other and their swords collided. At this point, Kisagari felt hard on eliminating Hildur and he just gritted his teeth. Then Hildur called him weak, and he asked him if he truly thinks he can kill a god like this. All of a sudden, Hildur kicked him and Kisagari was groaning in pain at that moment. Unexpectedly, Hildur raised his sword, and Kisagari was startled while looking at it. Then Hildur attacked him and luckily Kisagari managed to dodge it, but he crashed into the ground. Nonetheless, Lufin came closer to him and Hildur told him to get up since they were only getting started. Then Kisagari scratched Lufin's head and told him that he was fine, and no need to worry. At this point, Kisagari stood up and he told Lufin to lend him his strength. Then Lufin barked and he seemed to agree with Kisagari. Upon seeing them, Hildur told them very well, then, he'd train both of them. Now Kisagari can fight him like he means it. Nonetheless, Kisagari closed his eyes. Then he remembered his friend Hoshigani and his sister, Mayu. I don't have time to struggle here. I will defeat you, Kisagari stated.
At this point, Hildur attacked Kisagari, but Kisagari managed to dodge it. Then they were both closer to each other. Kisagari was mad, and he gritted his teeth at that moment. All of a sudden, Lufin was heading to them. Then Hildur used his power and said good teamwork. Suddenly, a status window appeared stating that skill martial has been activated. Instantaneously, he attacked Lufin. But according to Hildur, teamwork is not good enough. However, Kisagari and Lufin were both looking at Hildur. Then suddenly, a status window appeared stating that skill flame master has been activated. Instantaneously, Kisagari attacked Hildur using his skills. Hildur was just looking at it. Then suddenly, he blocked Kisagari's flame master. Nonetheless, Kisagari suddenly appeared behind Hildur. Then all of a sudden, Kisagari attacked him, but Hildur managed to dodge it. At this point, Hildur was about to grab the weapon. Upon seeing it, Kisagari was mad and he gritted his teeth at that moment. In an instant, Kisagari moved away from Hildur. He was shocked while looking at Hildur and according to him, he couldn't get through. However, Hildur asked him if is that all, and he told Kisagari that he'd never defeat a god like that. At this point, Loki was just looking at them, and in accordance with her, though Kisagari hasn't put Hildur on her back foot, it can at least be called a fight. She supposed Tsukasa Kisagari had grown until that point. But it's about time to call it. Sheath your sword, Tsukasa, and that will be all for today, Loki stated. Meanwhile, in the dining area, on the table, there was a lot of food. Then Kisagari was just looking at Loki while she was eating. Then suddenly, he called Loki and asked her if he could ask her something. What is it? I won't let you have my meat, Loki stated. Kisagari asked her if should they really be having a leisurely meal like this, and if wouldn't it be better to keep training. All of a sudden, Hildur bought food, and he told Kisagari that he would be in such a hurry. He must eat well and rest well. According to him, taking breaks is a form of training in its own right. But Kisagari told Hildur that he didn't have the time for that. Nonetheless, Loki told Kisagari to relax. Having all the time in the world and spending a year in these training grounds is equivalent to a single day in his reality. All of a sudden, Kisaragi hit the table and said, "Don't reveal something so important like it's nothing. You should have told me that first." But Hildur told him that instead of complaining, put himself to work and prepare for tomorrow's training. Then Kisaragi sighed and said fine. At this point, Loki was looking at Kisaragi while he was eating. Then she silently said, "Good grief, what a troublesome man." Meanwhile, during the night, Kisaragi was doing his training at that moment. Then Loki and Hildur were both watching him. However, Loki asked Hildur what are his thoughts about Tsukasa Kisaragi. Then Hildur said that if he must be honest, Kisaragi doesn't know his place. Upon hearing that to Hildur, Loki told him that is a harsh mentor. But Hildur said that there have been many humans before him who have attempted to defeat a god. Adventurers are all fools who only seek to challenge the gods in order to fulfill their dreams and desires. And that's what he'd always thought. But according to him, Kisaragi is different, and he would risk his life to defeat a god for another's sake. He told Loki that he didn't dislike such humans. Then he asked Loki if she had not fallen the same day. Loki said that she was supposed so. Kisaragi certainly keeps his boredom at bay. Meanwhile, 3 years have passed since Tsukasa Kisaragi began his training. At this point, Hildur called him Master Kisaragi and asked him if he remembered their score. Then Kisaragi told him of course. 999 battles and 0 victories. According to Kisaragi, he'd spent 3 years there. Of all the times they've fought, he lost everyone. Nonetheless, Hildur told him that this would be their final battle. If he still cannot beat him 1,000 times, then he is incapable of defeating Tamamonome. All of a sudden, Hildur pointed his sword, and he was surrounded with flames. "I permit you to use heavenly authority. Come at me with everything you've got," Hildur stated. Upon hearing that, Kisaragi held his weapon tightly, and he agreed with what Hildur said. Instantaneously, the status window appeared stating that skill Heavenly Authority had been activated. Then all of a sudden, Kisaragi was surrounded by blue flames at that moment. "Here I come, Hildur," Kisaragi stated. In an instant, he took a step. Then he immediately attacked Hildur, but he managed to block it. He told Kisaragi that it was still not enough. "Take this seriously." After Kisaragi heard it, he was mad and said, "Yeah, I'm just getting started." All of a sudden, he raised his sword, and it was surrounded with blue and black mist. Then the status window popped up stating that Skill Vannergand has been activated. Instantaneously, he attacked Hildur, and he was laughing at that moment. But Hildur also attacked him, and he released his power called Pseudo-Divine Armament. Then his Aegistina skills appeared. He said that he predicted as much. But he was suddenly puzzled when he saw Kisaragi was behind him, and he was laughing at him. At this point, Hildur was blocking the attack of Kisaragi. Then Kisaragi was startled, and he called Lufin at that moment. Instantaneously, Lufin immediately headed to them, and Hildur said that it couldn't be. Hildur was blocking the attack, and suddenly there were red and black flames that attacked Hildur. Then Lufin was shocked while seeing it. At this point, Hildur was speechless. All of a sudden, something explodes at that moment. Then Hildur said that well done. Surprisingly, Hildur was a lady, and she told Kisaragi that it was a wonderful strike filled with conviction. With that, he'd surely be able to face a god. Upon seeing her, Kisaragi was stunned, and he was startled at that moment. However, Hildur said that it was her loss. Then he told Kisaragi that he'd grown truly strong in these 3 short years. At this point, Kisaragi was heading to her and said, "Thank you very much, Hildur. I was able to grow stronger because of you." Suddenly, Loki came and she was smiling. Then she told Kisaragi that as expected of the man she saw promise in. Just for him, she'd keep quiet about the fact that he was captivated by Hildur at first sight. But Kisaragi told her that he wasn't captivated. He was just surprised since it was the first time he'd seen her face. Then Loki said, "Well, her beauty only loses to mine. I can understand why you'd be smitten." However, she told Hildur that honestly, he should remove his armor more often. Then Hildur said that she must always be ready for combat. It's only natural that she wears it at all times. Otherwise, she would be unfit to serve proudly as her knight. Nonetheless, Hildur told Loki that now then, it's time to go fox hunting. Then Loki told her that is what she'd like to say, but one more thing, grant it to Kisaragi. Upon hearing that, Kisaragi was shocked, and he was confused at that moment. Hildur called Tsukasa Kisaragi and Lufin. Then Kisaragi told them to come there. All of a sudden, Hildur held his head and said, "This is my gift to you. Please accept it." Instantaneously, a status window appeared stating that the skill copycat had been activated, and skill Einherjar was successfully copied. Then Hildur told Kisagari that those skills would allow him to transcend his human limits. Suddenly, she grabbed Lufin and said that it would take a burden on his body the longer it's activated, so use it wisely. Hildur smiled and she told Lufin that she'd give him this item. Be sure to use it if his master is ever in danger. Then she asked Lufin if he understood, and Lufin agreed to her at that moment. However, Loki was looking at Kisagari and asked him if he remembered that she asked him before she brought him there, if he were prepared to forsake his humanity, and this is the answer to that question. Loki and Hildur were both speechless at that moment. Then suddenly, Kisagari called them. Then he smiled and said thank you. Because of the two of you, I can fight. Upon hearing that, Loki was just speechless. Hildur told Loki that she'd found a good partner. Then Loki smiled and said that Kisagari was a man that she could be proud of. But Loki said that well then, it's about time. Then she asked if they confront Tamamonome directly, and he asked Kisagari what he thought. No, before that, I want to see Mayu and Rin. This could be the last time I see them after all, Kisagari stated. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Kisagari visited Rin. Then Kisagari said sorry. This is all because of me. But thanks to you, I can still fight. I'm going to defeat Tamamonome. I swear I will, even if it costs me my life. In the meantime, Kisagari went home, and his sister Mayu was shocked upon seeing him. Then she asked Kisagari where has he been, and she told her that she heard he was sent to the hospital along with Rin-san. But suddenly, she was startled and puzzled at that moment. Then she asked her brother if he was getting taller, and she told him that he looked older. Nevertheless, Kisagari scratched his head and smirked. Then he asked Mayu if couldn't she have phrased that in a nicer way. However, he told her that well, it's fine. More importantly, he has to talk to her about something. Then he asked his sister if that all right with her. At that moment, Mayu was startled and said sure. At this point, there was tea on the table, and Kisagari started to say something to Mayu. Suddenly, Mayu was shocked and she asked her brother to cure her illness and help Rin-san. He's going to a mythic rank dungeon. Then Kisagari told her that it was right. It's his fault that Rin is suffering. And besides, finding a cure for her illness is the reason he'd been dungeon diving in the first place. He has no other choice. After hearing that, Mayu was stunned and she felt worried about his brother at that moment. Nonetheless, she held her brother's hand and told him that she wouldn't force him to stay. But in exchange, he must promise that he'd come back. At that moment, Mayu was begging her brother. Then Kisagari just smirked and sighed. Suddenly, Kisagari scratched her head and asked, didn't I tell you before? I won't leave you, Mayu. He added and told her that he'd beat that god to a pulp and come back home. So believe in him and wait until he comes back. After hearing him, Mayu smirked and said right. Suddenly, Kisagari was holding a small envelope. All of a sudden, there was a violet flame that appeared and there was a way to come inside. At that moment, Loki asked Kisagari if Vixen was telling them to hurry inside. She was mad and said what an impatient woman. But Kisagari told him that it was fine by him, and they were the ones challenging her. Mayu was emotional, and she told Kisagari to stay safe. Then Kisagari glanced at her and said see you later. At this point, Kisagari was heading to enter the dungeon. Meanwhile, Kisagari and Loki arrived at the dungeon. Then in front of them was Vixen, and she told Kisagari that she'd be surprised he didn't flee. He has her praise. But all of a sudden, Kisagari grabbed his weapon and told Vixen that no need for small talk. Then he raised his sword and Kisagari was enraged at that moment. Come at me so I can kill you already, Vixen, Kisagari stated. Nevertheless, Vixen just smirked at that moment. However, Vixen asked Kisagari if aren't he's going to summon his little wolf pup, unless he's intending to fight her all on his own. Then Kisagari told her yeah, I'll kill you myself. Instantaneously, Vixen grabbed his weapon and said good grief. As always, at least your boldness is praiseworthy. At this point, Vixen was surrounded by violet flames and her power. Then Vixen said that however, humans tend to be very conceited creatures. She was heading to Kisagari and she told him that he wouldn't kill her so easily. She'd tease, torment, and torture him until he pleased death. Nonetheless, Kisagari was enraged and he was ready to kill Vixen at that moment. Then he told her that he should say the same. Even if she cries and begs, he will never forgive her. At this point, they both looked at each other. Then Vixen told Kisagari to do his best, and Kisagari said, here I come, Fox. All of a sudden, Kisagari was approaching Vixen, and he was about to attack her. At this point, Vixen was just looking at him, and she blocked the attack. However, Kisagari was mad, and he raised his weapon. Then he immediately strikes it to Vixen. But Vixen used her weapon and blocked again Kisagari's attack. She smirked and told Kisagari that it seemed his audacious words were merely just for show. Then she asked Kisagari if he hadn't abandoned his humanity. Upon hearing that, Kisagari was enraged, and there were blue flames in his eyes at that moment. All of a sudden, Kisagari kicked Vixen, and he told her that he had to, if he wanted to defeat a god. To achieve that, he'd do whatever it takes. At this point, Vixen was about to crash on the floor, and Kisagari prepared his Flamemaster skills. Then suddenly, Kisagari's Flamemasters were heading to attack Vixen. This fox was stunned, and said how insolent of you to kick away a god. Instantaneously, she used her weapon immediately. Then she released her power, and he told Kisagari to know his place. Nonetheless, Kisagari is still attacking Vixen. Suddenly, their powers collided and exploded at the center. Then Kisagari was just stunned at that moment, and Loki was behind him. Nonetheless, according to Loki, Tamamonome's iron fan is her divine instrument, the Yada no Kagami. It has the ability to nullify or reflect attacks from skills. After hearing that, Kisagari was thinking, and in his mind, Tamamonome's powerful skills were hard to deal with on their own, but that weapon of hers was the biggest nuisance. Suddenly, Tamamonome told him how leisurely he was taking his time to think in the midst of battle. There was a power in her hand. All of a sudden, Vixen blew it. Then there was a status window appeared stating that Skill Dark Arts had been activated. At this point, her Dark Arts Blossoming Blade Storm appeared, and she told Kisagari that they'd see if he tried to dodge it. Upon seeing it, Kisagari was shocked and puzzled. Instantaneously, Vixen attacked him, and Kisagari was running fast, so that he would not be hit by the Dark Arts Blossoming Blade Storm. But he was shocked when he saw it in his front. Then Vixen asked him if he thought he could get away that easily. All of a sudden, the Dark Arts Blossoming Blade Storm explodes. Kisagari was startled and stunned at that moment. Then Vixen said, "Petals from my Blossoming Blade Storm are flaming blades created with his Dark Arts. They aren't so weak as to be cleared away by a mere explosion." At this point, Kisagari resisted Vixen's power. Then he was enraged and said that he thought he could go a bit further, but he had no choice. He looked at Vixen evilly and told her that it was time for round 2. But Vixen told him that he was truly an infuriating human. Instantaneously, she released her power and said, "Dance forth petal blades. Cut that arrogant human to pieces." She attacked Kisagari at that moment. But Kisagari immediately dodges and avoids her attacks. Vixen was shocked, and according to her, Kisagari was so fast. Even he can barely keep up. Suddenly, Kisagari was heading to her, and she told him not to push his luck. Kisagari was holding his sword tightly. Then he swung it and blocked all the attack of Vixen. Upon seeing it, Vixen was shocked, and she was confused if Kisagari deflected her dark arts. According to her, it was so impossible. She was curious about how could Kisagari block the skill of a god such as her. All of a sudden, Kisagari appeared behind her and said, taking your time to think in the midst of battle. How leisurely. After she heard Kisagari, she glanced behind her and she was shocked. Instantaneously, Kisagari attacked her and Vixen just screamed at that moment. "I see that your power is beyond the capabilities of a mortal body," Vixen stated. Then she asked Kisagari, which is why it has a limitation. Does it not? An unavoidable time limit. Kisagari smirked and said, "Yeah, you're right. That's why I'll abandon my mortality." Kisagari pointed his sword at Vixen and said that this was the end. Suddenly a status window appeared, and it stated that Skill Einherjar had been activated. Skill effect while active dramatically increases physical abilities and skill potency, while also allowing the use of divine skills. Warning: may have consequences on the user's body after the effect is dispelled depending on how long the skill was active. "I'll place my life on the line to kill you here and now," Kisagari stated. Vixen was mad and she asked Kisagari if he had broken through the divine selection. Then she said how foolish. And she asked Loki if this was his way of doing things. Loki told her that it was not foolish at all. Everything Kisagari did was out of his desire to defeat her. After hearing that, Vixen was mad and she asked Loki if she understood what she'd done. Then she told her that this was a clear act of complicity with humanity, the one line they are never allowed to cross. But Loki asked him, who says it's not allowed, and who decided that they can't aid humanity in the first place. Nevertheless, Loki tells her that she's the one there that decides who lives or dies. If anyone objects to that, then she will show no mercy, even if they are a god. However, she will not be the one rendering her judgment. At this point, Loki whispered at Kisaragi to show her his resolve. Instantaneously, Kisaragi agreed with her and said, "I will." Suddenly, Vixen was groaning in pain and she gritted her teeth. Then she told Kisaragi that very well, that power and resolve of him. All of a sudden, she was mad and said, "I'll smash them into smithereens." Instantaneously, she used her iron fan and attacked Kisaragi at that moment. Suddenly, Kisaragi extended his hand, and he immediately blocked Vixen's attack. At this point, Kisaragi was heading to Vixen, but Vixen immediately blocked him. All of a sudden, Kisaragi kicked her. Then Kisaragi released her Flamemaster skill. She was mad and told Kisaragi not to look down on her. Even if he'd obtained the power of a god, these flames are nothing. All of a sudden, there was something exploded. But Vixen was shocked when Kisaragi appeared and asked her when she learned. Then Kisaragi immediately attacked her without any other word. He raised his sword and he held it tightly. Instantaneously, he used his Vannergan skill and attacked Vixen. At this point, Kisaragi was just looking at the explosion. Vixen was groaning in pain at that moment. But she was still mad and she told Kisaragi not to get ahead of himself. Nevertheless, she was startled when she saw that Kisaragi was about to kick her. Instantaneously, Kisaragi kicked her and she flew away. However, she managed to land. Then she was mad and said again with the insolent kicking. All of a sudden, Vixen was in her berserk mode and she said that she refused to allow such disgrace. Then she immediately attacks Kisaragi. But Kisaragi prepared to attack her too. At this point, Kisaragi blocked and avoided her attacks. Vixen was annoyed at that moment. Instantaneously, Kisaragi swung his sword. Then he extended his hand and said, "Mirror image, paradise, banquet of champions, land of forever young." He attacked Vixen at that moment, and there was an explosion that happened in front. Suddenly, Loki appeared behind him and asked him if have he noticed this isn't over yet. Then Kisaragi told her that yes, and he knew. However, Loki smirked and said, "Good. Don't let your guard down just yet. A cornered rat will bite the cat, as they say." All of a sudden, Vixen appeared and asked, calling a rat chased into the corner, "Are you?" She was mad and said, "I never thought I'd have to get serious against pathetic worms like you." At this point, Loki and Kisaragi were both shocked. Then Loki told Vixen that finally, she'd show her true colors now. Suddenly, a status window appeared, and it stated that the skill Celestial Nine-Tailed Beast had been activated. All of a sudden, Vixen became a huge fox and said for the sin of mocking a god, even death would be too lenient. Kisaragi smiled and said, "So that's Tamamonome's real powers, her true form." Then Loki told him to give her everything he had, and this was the final stretch. Instantaneously, Vixen attacked Kisaragi, but he managed to dodge it. He held his sword tightly, and he immediately released his power. Nevertheless, Vixen dodged it, and she was mad at that moment. Then she was heading to attack Kisaragi, and said, "Too naive." But Kisaragi managed to block her. According to her, it was so heavy. Unfortunately, Kisaragi was hit at that moment. Then Vixen was just looking at him while he was exploding. However, Kisaragi was still alive, and he was stunned. He was wondering and said that this is the true power of a god. According to him, Vixen won't let him win that easily. All of a sudden, he jumped off. Then he immediately attacked Vixen, but she managed to dodge. Vixen told him that he should already know that the move wouldn't work. Instantaneously, she attacked Kisaragi, and his power was broken at that moment. He was mad and he swung his sword and slightly hit Vixen. Then he fell to the floor. At this point, he looked exhausted and he just sighed. Suddenly, Vixen was in his front, and she asked, "What's wrong, human? You seem to be struggling. Your divine power is thinning, you know?" But Kisaragi smirked and told her that she must have bad eyesight. In an instant, he released his flame masters and said that the fight was just getting started. There were flames at Vixen's tail. Then Kisaragi attacked her, but she blocked it. Suddenly, Vixen strikes him, and Kisaragi shouts at that moment. However, Kisaragi kept attacking her, but still she blocked it. Then Vixen told Kisaragi that he's like a candle in the wind, but being strong won't be enough to kill her. At this point, Kisaragi was standing at the top of the radius. Then he was puzzled and Lufin suddenly appeared at that moment. Kisaragi said that Lufin came out on his own again. Then Vixen asked Lufin if he come to protect his master. But what can he do with that puny body? Upon hearing that, Lufin was mad. All of a sudden, he shouted and there was a circle of flames that surrounded them. Kisaragi was shocked and he was confused if that was the collar that Miss Hilder gave him. Instantaneously, Lufin became a huge wolf, and Vixen was just looking at him. According to her, that was the god-eating silver wolf. Then Lufin was mad, and he screamed at that moment. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you wish to have another manhwa recap like this, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel so you will be updated for more content like this. Until next time.